Chapter 93. He accompanied Song Tao Tao until evening before heading back to the inn. There was a stall selling tonghalu along the way. The tonghalu on the straw figurine looked sweet. He took out the last few copper coins he had and bought a few skewers. He took the biggest one and gave it to Song Tao Tao. "Are you hungry? Eat some of this to fill your stomach. When we get back to the inn, we'll eat something good." God had mercy on her. Along the way, she had been thinking about what to do if Song Tao Tao wanted to eat at a restaurant and she didn't have enough money. Fortunately, she ate too much in the morning and the little girl was picky, so she didn't want to eat anything along the way. She just sat down and drank a few cups of tea, ate 2 pieces of cake, and spent a few copper coins. Song Tao Tao took the tonghalu and looked at Hien. "Thank you for your hard work today." She paused and said, "Actually, there isn't much to see in Liangzhou City. The things are ordinary. If it wasn't to hide from second young Master Xiao, I wouldn't have let you accompany me until so late." Huh? Hien also took a stick of candied haws and put one in his mouth. The hawthorn was sour and astringent, and the honey was sweet and sour together, making him salivate. Hien lamented that he hadn't eaten such childish things in a long time. He asked, "What's wrong? Don't you like Military Governor Xiao?" "It's not that I don't like him. It's just, I'm a little scared." The little girl pursed her lips. "It seems that in front of him, everyone will feel inferior." Hien was amused. "Inferior?" Song Tao Tao was like this because she was too young. Hien smiled. "But he's handsome and powerful. Don't all little girls like him?" When he was young, there were many girls who secretly came to see Xiaoju. Hien had never seen a girl who didn't like him. Song Tao Tao's behavior was already very special. "I'm different from them." Song Tao Tao snorted. "They only know how to look at appearances, but such a cold person who doesn't know how to speak sweet words will make their lives miserable. I don't like this kind of man. I like a gentle man." She sighed and said regretfully, "Young Master Xiao is very good like that. It's a pity that he already has a wife." Hien almost choked on the hawthorn in his mouth. What? Xiaoju wanted to be his niece-in-law's uncle, but he didn't know that she wanted to be his sister-in-law. Song Tao Tao was indeed someone who had almost become her little fiancé. She actually had such a different view of people. Hien said, "Actually, Military Governor Xiao is quite gentle sometimes, but it's rare to see someone like you who doesn't like him." Her heart skipped a beat. She wanted to get something out of Song Tao Tao, so she asked, "Do you know General Fei Hong, who is now as famous as him? Have you seen him before?" "General Fei Hong?" Song Tao Tao said, "Are you talking about he family's eldest young master? The one who said that he couldn't see anyone because of the injury on his face, and that he wore a mask all day long?" Hien, "It's rare for him to wear a mask every day for 10 years. I saw him before I ran away from the marriage. At that time, he had already taken off his mask. He looked all right. Do you know why he wore a mask?" Song Tao Tao asked. "Hien, why?" "Naturally, it was to find a gimmick for himself. Think about it. He didn't take off his mask earlier or later. He took it off right before His Majesty conferred him the title. He said that he had the help of a godly doctor to heal the scar on his face. But how could there be a godly doctor who couldn't even see the scar? After so many years, everyone knew that he family's eldest young master was ugly and terrifying. When he suddenly took off his mask, he turned out to be an elegant young master. This was so bizarre. So, his original 5 points of appearance became 7 points. Hien couldn't help but applaud Song Tao Tao in his heart. What she said made sense. If she wasn't the one who wore the mask, he would almost believe that Song Tao Tao was telling the truth. "Then what do you think of General Fei Hong compared to Military Governor Xiao?" Song Tao Tao answered without thinking, "Of course it's second young Master Xiao. That he family's eldest young master isn't as good-looking as second young Master Xiao. Fine, in this world, people still judge people by their appearance." Hien said in surprise, "I've never seen General Fei Hong before. I have the same surname as him. I've always wanted to see him with my own eyes. I wonder if I have the chance in this lifetime?" "Of course you have the chance. However, he family's eldest young master is now very valued by His Majesty. Before I left the capital, His Majesty often summoned him to the palace. Previously, when his cousin passed away, He family's eldest young master didn't attend court for a few days. His Majesty even gave him a lot of things. Tian's smile was a bit forced. Are you talking about Su family's eldest young mistress? Did she marry someone with a surname Su? I'm not too sure either. I don't know what her name is. This older sister wasn't in the capital before. There were very few people in the capital who knew her, and she didn't have any close sisters. I only know that she was General Fei Hong's younger sister. After being married for a year, she contracted a strange disease and became blind. After she became blind, she wandered around the manor by herself. The servants didn't notice, and she fell into the pond and drowned. Song Taodao sighed. How pitiful. She clearly had General Fei Hong as her backing. How could she have lived a bad life? I can only say that she had a hard life. What was her name again? He something? AI. I really don't remember. Hien thought to himself. She was called Hien. Unfortunately, this name was destined to be buried under General Fei Hong's name. The only people who knew of her was the young mistress of the He family, General Fei Hong's younger sister, who was born with a weak body and was sent to a farmstead to be raised. No one remembered her name. Then what about eldest young Master Su? Hien asked, after Su family's eldest young mistress died. What happened to him? I usually don't like to hear about these things when I'm in the manor. I vaguely remember my sisters mentioning that Miss He's husband was very depressed for a period of time after the death of the young mistress of the He family. The truth was that he was deeply in love. But this kind of thing, who knows? Song Taodao had a kind of insight that surpassed her age in this kind of matter. She said, when can a man's words be taken seriously? Who knows, he might still be reminiscing today and welcoming a new person into the manor tomorrow. Hien smiled bitterly. What you said makes a lot of sense. Why are you suddenly asking me these things? Song Taodao said, but I really don't know much. If you really want to know, you should ask second young Master Xiao. They're both military generals and colleagues. They should know more than me. Hien thought, wasn't that because she was afraid that Xiao Ju would suspect her? Right now, she already didn't regard her as one of their own. If she continued to ask about the He family, Xiao Ju would probably dig up everything about her. If her identity as a woman was exposed before she even found out anything, she wouldn't even be able to stay in the military camp. Then, the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. As they spoke, they had already reached the entrance of the inn. Hien and Song Taodao went upstairs. Song Taodao said, thank you so much for today. I will go in and change my clothes and rest for a while. Later, accompany me to eat something. Hien smiled and said, okay. Although this young lady had the habits of a young mistress and liked to order people around, he didn't dislike her. After she left, Hien didn't return to his room. Instead, he knocked on the door next door. Today was very good. Someone in the room answered, come in. As soon as Hien entered, he saw Xiao Ju sitting at the table. She was using a white handkerchief to wipe the guqin in front of her. Hien took a closer look and saw that it was the guqin that she had crushed. Commander-in-Chief, is the guqin fixed? It's not broken, right? Hien leaned over and asked in a low voice. Xiao Ju lazily said, what's the matter? She completely didn't want to talk to him. Hien took out his hands from behind his back and said, look, I brought you a gift today. Although I accompanied Miss Song to buy things, I still miss you in my heart. This tonghalu is for you. Xiao Ju glanced at the tonghalu in her hands and said, take it away. She was so unreasonable. Hien said, don't. I've already tasted it. It's very sweet. I don't eat sweets, he said indifferently. Hien looked at him and cursed in his heart. What was he pretending for? When they were together at the Xianchang restaurant, this person carried a small sachet with him. At that time, the young man who was close to him tried to snatch it, and he protected it tightly. Hien thought that it was some kind of treasure. In the end, he found out that it was just a bag of osmanthus candy. He went home 2 days a month. When he came back to the Xianchang restaurant again, the sachet was full again. A person who always carried osmanthus candy with him when he was young was now telling her that he didn't eat sweets. Did this person dislike the fact that it was bought with 2 copper coins? If you don't eat it, you can give it to Fei Nu. Hien put the tonghalu into the pen holder on the table. He changed the topic and his expression softened. He smiled and said flatteringly, Governor, I still have something to discuss with you. Xiaoju looked at him with a calm gaze. He continued to say, shamelessly, I accompanied Miss Song out today. Miss Song wanted to buy clothes and jewelry. She has already spent all the money she got from fighting for the flag. I thought that since Miss Song is your niece-in-law, she is your relative. Although I shouldn't spend the money to buy things for your relative, I am sincere to the governor. How can I let the governor spend money? It's just that I don't have any money now. If Miss Song wants to buy something, can you give me some money? If I don't have money to buy things, I don't want to embarrass you, right? Uncle? Uncle? The young man's smile was particularly flattering. His eyes flashed with intelligence, like a fox cub that he had hunted when he was young. He could bite people, but when he asked for food, he pretended to be obedient and docile. Xiaoju looked at him coldly, unmoved. Ian asked, Can you do it? The man's reply was very heartless. No. Really? She was still unwilling to give up. No. Ian straightened up and stared at him with hatred. In her previous life, when she joined the army, she had heard people say that a person's true growth began from borrowing money. Ian now understood. She was already so humble. Xiaoju was so rich, but he didn't give her any money. He was deliberately targeting her. Xiaoju raised his head with a calm expression and mocked. I still remember that I'm not your uncle. Did you forget that Song Taodao is Chung Li-su's fiancé, not yours? Ian thought for a while before she understood. She said, You don't think that I and Miss Song. Xiaoju lowered his eyes and continued to wipe the zither. I hope you still remember who you are. Ian almost cursed it out loud in his heart. Look at what he was saying. Was this something a human would say? Was Xiaoju afraid that she would steal Chung Li-su's fiancé? What a joke. If she hadn't taken the initiative to leave home, how could Chung Li-su have this fiancé? Also, Xiaoju wanted to be her uncle. Did he know that she wanted to be his sister-in-law? She didn't want to be his wife. So what did he know? Ian was angry in her heart. She put on a fake smile and said, Of course I remember who I am. I'm Ian who won first place in the Liangzhou Guard competition. She emphasized the word first place and said, If the commander-in-chief doesn't want to give me money, then forget it. She turned to leave, but suddenly remembered something. She turned around and grabbed the tong hulu on the table. Since the commander-in-chief doesn't like to eat sweets, I'll take this tong hulu and eat it myself. She took a big bite, as if she was venting her anger. As she walked out, she mumbled, What kind of commander-in-chief is he? He's just a stingy miser. Xiaoju, Fei Nu, who was outside, happened to hear this when he came in. He looked at He Yan's back and closed the door in confusion. Xiaoju looked up at him. Young master, it's nothing. Xiaoju interrupted him. Did you get anything today? Fei Nu shook his head. He Yan has been accompanying Miss Song. He didn't do anything today. He just strolled around the streets and drank tea. He didn't meet anyone. Xiaoju nodded. I know. Is it possible that the person he met wasn't from Liangzhou? Fei Nu asked. I feel that He Yan is a bit strange. Not to mention his extraordinary skills, he was a new recruit, but he knew how to set up a race. However, he didn't get caught. It could be seen that his attitude towards Xiaoju was extremely bold. Ordinary people wouldn't be like this, right? He's by my side. I won't make any mistakes. Tell Chi Wu to come here and pick him up. Young master, do you want Chi Wu to accompany Miss Song? Fei Nu asked. Xiaoju nodded. Yuan Baozhen is about to arrive in Liangzhou. It's not suitable for Song Taodao to travel with him. There are no good meetings and no good feasts, he said calmly. We have to be fully prepared. Fei Nu replied, I understand. The next few days were very comfortable. Song Taotao's hand hadn't fully recovered from the first day of strolling around. She was too lazy to go out these days. Xiaoju and Fei Nu were often absent during the day. Ian didn't want to leave Song Taotao alone at the inn, so he could only accompany her. The little girl was easy to coax. He casually told her about the strange people and strange things he met in the army. She listened very seriously. When she was tired of listening, she casually ate downstairs at the inn. The day passed quickly. Yin herself really wanted to go out with Xiaoju and the others and ask around for some information, but they didn't bring her along at all. It was obvious that they wanted to exclude her. After a few times, Yin was also a person who knew her own limits and was too lazy to go forward. This trip to Liangzhou wasn't worth it. His only hope was that imperial censor Yuan Baojian. Tian had never looked forward to someone's arrival so much. Fortunately, after 3 days, imperial censor Yuan finally arrived in Liangzhou City. This morning, Fei Nu brought someone over. This young man was also dressed like a guard. His name was Qi Wu, and he should be Xiao Ju's confidant. He came over to take Song Taotao away. You can't stay here for the time being. Qi Wu will send you to a safe place. I'll come to pick you up after the matter in Liangzhou is settled, Xiao Ju said. Song Taotao looked at He Yin, then, young Master Qing won't come with me? The others immediately looked at He Yin, especially Xiao Ju. Her eyes were extremely cold. He Yin instantly understood the meaning of, you have to deal with your own problems. She could only stand up and smile at Song Taotao. I have to do something with second young Master Xiao, so I can't accompany you for now. Don't worry this. Qi Wu will protect you. What is it? Is it dangerous? Song Taotao asked again. He Yin was embarrassed but also touched. He didn't dote on this child for nothing. She even knew to ask if it was dangerous. She smiled. With second young Master Xiao around, it's not dangerous. Don't worry. Then you must be careful. Song Taotao warned her, then walked away, looking back every few steps. He Yin turned around and was met with Xiao Ju's mocking gaze. She said, I really didn't do anything. Xiao Ju turned around and left. He Yin hurriedly chased after her. Uncle, don't be angry. Although Miss Song only asked if it was safe for me and not you, it wasn't because she thought you were cold and unapproachable. I'm kind, gentle, and likable. Please don't take it to heart. Shut up. Xiao Ju stopped and looked at her from head to toe. He sneered, if you have time to talk nonsense, why don't you think about how to not be exposed at the banquet? Chung Li Su is still the young master of the UC Naolang's residence. And you, he looked at her meaningfully, can you act like it? After saying this, he left without looking back. He Yin was stunned for a moment before she realized that this person was mocking her again. She shouted at Xiao Ju's back, what's wrong with the UC Naolang? In the end, she was also the young master of the He family, who wasn't an official. She had pretended to be the young master of a rich family for so many years. What couldn't she pretend to be? Tonight, she must make Xiao Ju look at her in a different light. At the Liangzhou city gate, a carriage stood out among the crowd. This carriage was very luxuriously decorated. Even the outside was embroidered with a large mountain and river painting. There was also a white crane in the grass. The white crane's eyes were made of black crystal. It was very exquisite and interesting. Someone lifted the curtain of the carriage and looked outside. After a while, the curtain was put back down. Yuan Baojian covered his nose with a handkerchief and said, the wind in this Liangzhou city is really strong. It's much worse than the capital. He was now in his 40s. In fact, he was about the same age as Sun Xiangfu. Compared to Sun Xiangfu, he took good care of himself. His clothes were neat and tidy. His face was white and beardless. When he spoke, there was a hint of a smile. He looked very amiable. Say, Xiao Ju coming to this place. Isn't he asking for trouble? He asked the person next to him. Next to him sat a person who looked like a guard. His appearance was mediocre and his body was thin. If it wasn't for the thick calluses between his thumb and index finger, others would think that he was just an ordinary servant. I don't know, the guard replied. Forget it. Since I'm going to see him today, I'll ask him myself. Yuan Baojian smiled. Hey, is the Sun family coming? Sun Xiangfu had personally come to welcome him. A satisfied smile appeared on Yuan Baojian's face. Not bad, not bad. Magistrate Sun is very polite. Sun Xiangfu looked at the carriage that had stopped and wiped the sweat off his forehead. Originally, when the imperial censor came to Liangzhou, although he couldn't neglect him, he didn't need to welcome him at the city gates. However, he had already offended Xiao Ju. If he offended Yuan Baojian as well, he wouldn't have any chance of survival. He still hoped that Yuan Baojian would back him up and make Xiao Ju suffer a little. Naturally, he had to use all his efforts to please the person in front of him. When Yuan Baojian got off the carriage, Sun Xiangfu went up to him and cupped his hands. Lord Yuan, please forgive me for not going out to welcome you. Don't mention it. Yuan Baojian smiled amiably. I feel that Lord Sun is very friendly. Lord Sun, you don't have to be so polite. The two of them chatted for a while before Sun Xiangfu said, if that's the case, please come to my residence to rest. Yuan Baozhen had come to Liangzhou to temporarily stay at the Sun estate. The two of them then boarded the carriage that Sun Xiangfu had prepared. Inside the carriage, Yuan Baozhen asked, I heard that the Right Army's commander-in-chief has arrived in Liangzhou. Is he in your residence right now? Military Governor Xiao is temporarily staying at an inn in Liangzhou City. He said that he has important matters to attend to. He just arrived tonight. Speaking of which, this official has something that I need Lord Yuan's help with. Yuan Baozhen's eyes flickered, but his smile remained the same as before. He only asked, Magistrate Sun, what is troubling you? It's the matter of Military Governor Xiao. My unfilial son accidentally offended Military Governor Zhao's nephew. I'm afraid that Military Governor Xiao will resent me because of this. Since I've prepared a banquet to welcome Lord Yuan, I hope that Lord Yuan can mediate and resolve this misunderstanding. Sun Xiangfu's face was full of shame. Although he didn't say what the matter was, Yuan Baozhen could guess. The son of a county magistrate who could cover the sky with one hand in Liangzhou was naturally not a good person. That Xiao Ju's nephew was the young master of the Right Army's Minister Nailing. If the two clashed, the young master's son was destined to suffer. He thought this in his heart, but said, I think that Magistrate's son is overthinking this matter. That Military Governor Xiao isn't an unreasonable person. Since it was an accident, it's fine to clear things up. Why would he still hold a grudge? That's true. Sun Xiangfu wiped his sweat and smiled apologetically. But Military Governor Xiao, didn't he deal with Zhao Nuo the same way back then? As soon as he said this, Yuan Baozhen's expression changed. Everyone in Dawei knew that Xiao Ju had beheaded the eldest son of the Minister of Revenue, Zhao Nuo, at the Monument Hall. However, too much time had passed and other people thought that he was young and impetuous, so they gradually forgot. Now that Sun Xiangfu mentioned it, Yuan Baozhen remembered it again. When Zhao Nuo was in trouble, the first person that Minister Zhao went to was actually Prime Minister Su. Prime Minister Su handed over the invitation, and Minister Zhao went to the throne room and cried in front of the emperor. The emperor was very sympathetic, but did not punish Xiao Ju. If the wood is not cut from its roots, it will come back to life. If the water is not cut from its source, it will come back to flow. If the disaster is not cut from its roots, it will come back to chaos. At the time, Prime Minister Su only said this one sentence. If I don't get rid of this person, he will become a big problem for me in the future. They all wanted to take advantage of the fact that Xiao Ju was still young and hadn't grown up yet to quickly get rid of him. However, ever since he led the Southern Mansion soldiers to the southern barbarian lands, he never left anyone with this opportunity. His speed of growth was astonishing. In just a few years, the person who killed Zhao Nuo, whom everyone thought was unreasonable, was doing the same thing now. Others would think it was normal. This was the result of Xiao Ju's efforts in these few years. He was much more powerful than Xiao Zhongwu and much younger. Darren Yuan? Seeing Yuan Baozhen's strange expression and silence, Sun Xiangfu did not understand and asked anxiously, It's nothing, I just thought of something else. Yuan Baozhen smiled. Since Military Governor Xiao has come to the banquet tonight, I will speak to him for you. However, I don't know the temperament of Military Governor Xiao. If he does not listen to me, don't blame him. No, Sun Xiangfu was moved to tears. I'm already very happy that Darren Yuan is willing to speak. Yuan Baozhen smiled and shook his head. His thoughts had already flown to other places. No matter how powerful Xiao Ju was, he came to Liangzhou this time to get rid of this big problem for Prime Minister Su. He hoped that everything would go well. In the evening, he was going to go out with Xiao Ju. They were going to Sun Xiangfu's residence, so they had to send Song Taodao away. Otherwise, if Sun Ling saw Song Taodao, or if Song Taodao saw Sun Ling, something might go wrong. Because they were going to the banquet, He deliberately changed into a very Chung Lisu robe. It was a honey-colored robe with a red carp embroidered on the corner. Chung Lisu looked cute and innocent in this robe, but Yin looked different in it. He looked brighter and more open, but he was still a handsome young man. She picked a hairpin of the same color and stuck it in her hair. She did not forget to pick up the folding fan and held it in front of her chest. When she looked at the person in the bronze mirror, she was very satisfied. After tidying up, Hien stepped out of the door. As soon as he stepped out, he saw Xiao Ju standing at the door. He had also changed into a different robe. It was a dark blue robe with 2 cranes. He did not wear a golden crown today. Only a red sandalwood hairpin was inserted. It looked simple, but if one looked carefully, the material and embroidery were of high quality. He was born exceptionally handsome, and with such attire, he lost some of his aloofness and gained a trace of elegance. He was indeed a noble and elegant young master. Hien thought that the bright and beautiful young man had finally grown into such a handsome young man. He did not seem to have changed, but at the same time, he seemed to be completely different from before. Xiao Ju turned sideways and met Hien's slightly dazed gaze. He smiled and said, "Wipe your saliva clean." Hien subconsciously wiped his saliva. He immediately came back to his senses and said, "Wen, you look like a fool." His words were full of disdain. "You still want to hide it from Yuan Baojian?" As soon as Hien heard this, she was not convinced. With a schwa sound, she opened up her folding fan and walked to Xiao Ju's side. She smiled faintly and said in a low voice, "With my appearance, if I was in Shuo capital, even if I don't dare to be a governor, I would at least be on par with Cheng Gongzi. Otherwise, why would Miss Song only tell me before she left and not you?" The young man's eyes were full of smiles. His eyes were as bright as the stars, but he could not stop his foolishness. Xiao Ju mocked, "Because you are stupid." "What?" "Stupid people always need a lot of reminders." Hien frowned. "Uncle, do you hate me?" This person, would he die if he did not mock him for a day? "You are my nephew. Why would I hate you?" Xiao Ju glanced at him with a smile and ordered Fei Nu, "Let's go." Chapter 94. The Sun Estate was located in the center of the western part of Liangzhou City. It wasn't far from the market square, but it wasn't too noisy. The residences around the estate were large and beautiful. Xiao Ju didn't like to travel by carriage, so the two of them rode on horses together. Fei Nu didn't follow them, so they didn't know where he was. He didn't protect Second Miss Song like Qi Wu did, nor did he follow Xiao Ju to the banquet. Hien guessed that he was probably helping Xiao Ju with something. Without Fei Nu, only Hien and Xiao Ju were left. Normally, Fei Nu was a man of few words, but Hien would at least exchange a few words with him. Being alone with Xiao Ju, Hien felt inexplicably nervous. Fortunately, I didn't need to talk much as they were riding on horseback. In the time it took to burn 3 sticks of incense, they arrived at the entrance of the Sun Estate. The servant at the entrance of the Sun Estate saw the two of them. He must have been notified by Sun Xiangfu in advance, so he immediately warmly greeted them. "This must be Military Governor Xiao, right? And this is young Master Cheng?" Master is already waiting in the front hall. He took Xiao Ju and Hien's horses and ordered another servant. "And you bring Military Governor Xiao and young Master Cheng inside." The maidservant named Ding Yu was also very beautiful. It was already the 9th month, and the autumn nights were already chilly, but she was only wearing a thin gauze dress. If she said she wasn't wearing anything, then she was wearing an extra layer, but if she said she was wearing something, then what could she cover? Hien almost couldn't control himself and put an outer garment on this girl. The men in their barracks had once said that when they were young, they often fought bare-chested. When they were old, it was inevitable that their legs and waist would hurt. Why bother? Ingyu opened her mouth to speak, her voice as mellow as an oriole's. "Martial Governor, please follow this servant." As she spoke, she looked into Xiao Ju's eyes, her eyes filled with tender affection. Although Hien was a fool, he knew that this servant girl had taken a fancy to Xiao Ju. Well, there weren't many girls like Song Taotao in this world. Everyone in the world was a normal person. Xiao Ju's face was quite scary. There were countless girls who fell in love with him. Hien should have expected this. Xiao Ju didn't even look at the servant girl. Instead, she glanced sideways at Hien and coldly said, "Why are you in a daze?" "Ah?" Hien came back to his senses. Seeing that he had already walked forward, he hurriedly followed. She thought to herself that this person was really sick. He didn't look at such a beautiful young lady, and instead looked for trouble with her. The two of them followed the maidservant into the Sun estate. The Sun residence was luxuriously renovated. Hien had seen the residences of the officials in the capital, but they were just so. Although the He family couldn't be compared to the Shao family, they were still considered officials in the capital. The Sun estate was actually comparable to the He families. However, this wasn't the capital but Liangzhou. Sun Xiangfu wasn't an official in the capital, he was just a county magistrate. 3 years of being a county magistrate, 100,000 snowflakes of silver. These words weren't false. Hien looked at the mountain rocks, bonsai, and glazed jade tiles. He couldn't help but be amazed. How could a county magistrate afford these things with his salary? Who knew how much money Sun Xiangfu had taken from the people? Also, looking at Sun Ling's conduct, the Sun family's father and son had done a lot of evil in Liangzhou. They were practically half a local tyrant. She thought to herself, but she didn't know that her appearance was also seen by the person beside her. Xiao Ju's eyes moved slightly. The young man was wearing Cheng Li Su's clothes, but he wasn't as innocent as Cheng Li Su. Although it was said that people rely on clothes and horses rely on saddles, a low-level recruit pretending to be the young master of a large family would definitely give himself away. Things done, people seen, would be engraved into a person's body, becoming clear traces. Everyone's traces were different. Hian's eyes were filled with emotion and contemplation, but there was no fear or nervousness. If this was his first time doing something like this, and going to a place like this kind of reaction wouldn't be justified. At this time, Ingyu stopped and said, "Master, Military Governor Xiao and young Master Qing have arrived." Immediately, Sun Xiangfu's exaggerated voice sounded from inside. "Military Governor Xiao has arrived." This official was afraid that they wouldn't come. "It's good that they're here. It's good that they're here." Ian looked up. This person's appearance was filled with fear and trepidation. He didn't have the awe-inspiring aura he had when they first met at the inn a few days ago. Being an official like this, he wasn't afraid of being laughed at. Sun Xiangfu didn't wait for Xiao Ju to speak and turn around to reveal the person behind him. He smiled and said, "Lord Yuan has also arrived." This was Yuan Baozhen? Ian looked at him. He saw a middle-aged man with a white face and no beard smiling amiably at them. In an instant, this person overlapped with the person in He Yan's memory. The first time she saw Yuan Baozhen, it was outside the He family study. At that time, He Rufei had already gone to receive his meritorious service, taken off his mask, and truly became General Feihong. And she, as the young miss of the He family's second branch, was waiting for the day she would marry into the Su family. When she saw this person, she was stunned for a moment. She didn't expect He Rufei to make friends in the imperial court so quickly. Later, when she asked He Rufei who that person was, He Rufei said that it was the current imperial censor, Yuan Baozhen. "You're with him? What are you doing?" Ian had only asked casually at the time. He Rufei looked at her and smiled strangely. He said, "What you need to do now is embroider your wedding dress and not care about these things." Ian moved closer. His tone was unfathomable. "You have to remember, you are now the young miss of the He family's second branch, a woman." Ian didn't think much of it. She didn't know how to embroider, and she wasn't the one embroidering the wedding dress. But she understood the meaning of He Rufei's words. He Rufei was warning her not to have any contact with General Feihong. Was he afraid that the truth would be discovered? Yin sneered in her heart. It was ridiculous that she didn't notice the murderous intent in He Rufei's words at that time. Now that she suddenly met her cousin's friend, how should she get the information she wanted? Before Yin could think clearly, Yuan Baozhen had already stepped forward. He first cupped his hands in greeting to Xiao Ju. "Governor." Then he looked at Yin. "This is Cheng Gongzi, right?" Yin stared at him and revealed a surprised smile. "Lord Yuan, I've long heard that Cheng Gongzi is young and valiant, with an extraordinary appearance. Now that I've met you, it is indeed true." Yuan Baozhen smiled. "Heroes indeed come from the young." Yin, wasn't Cheng Li Su the famous good-for-nothing Gongzi in the capital? Fortunately, this person continued to speak. He understood that if he wanted to become an official in Wei, the first thing he had to do was to learn the ability to speak human language when meeting people and speak ghost when meeting ghosts. Ian could only say, "You flatter me, you flatter me. This one is ashamed." As the two of them chatted politely, Sun Xiangfu rubbed his hands and said uneasily, "Governor, this official has a presumptuous request." "Xiao Ju, what is it? Didn't my son offend Governor and Cheng Gongzi some time ago?" Sun Xiangfu appeared to be very uneasy. Although this official has taught him a lesson, this child feels very guilty and wants to personally apologize to Governor and Cheng Gongzi. This official thinks that since he knows that he was wrong, this official will thicken his old face and beg Governor to give this unfilial son a chance to apologize. "Everyone makes mistakes," Yuan Baojin chimed in from the side. He smiled and said, "Moreover, this is only a misunderstanding. As long as the misunderstanding is resolved, the governor will not take it to heart. Quickly call Sun Xiaoye over and clarify things with Military Governor Xiao." "Really?" Sun Xiangfu excitedly ordered the servant. "Quickly call Sun Xiaoye over." Ian saw that the two of them were singing the same tune and did not even ask for Xiao Ju's opinion before finishing the show. He knew that the two of them must have discussed this beforehand. This Yuan Baojin seemed to be the same type of person as Sun Xiangfu. How could someone who could be so close to He Rufei be a kind person? Sun Ling seemed to have been waiting outside the hall. Not long after he finished speaking, he came in with the servant. As soon as he came in, he knelt down in front of Xiao Ju. Ian almost bit his own tongue. This person used to be arrogant and insufferably arrogant. Now, in just a few days, he looked much more haggard, as if he was seriously ill. He was dressed very simply. He bowed to Xiao Ju and said weakly, "Previously, I was insensible and had an argument with Cheng Gongzi. Now I know that I was wrong. I hope that Governor and Cheng Gongzi can forgive me for being young and frivolous. I will definitely turn over a new leaf and never do it again." Was this how young and frivolous was used? Looking at his appearance, he was not young anymore. Ian did not believe that this person would be able to not do it again in just a few days. She looked at Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju's expression was indifferent. She did not say yes or no. The atmosphere froze for a moment. Ian still had to mediate. In any case, it was an opera. If they did not continue, wouldn't the banquet be awkward? She smiled and looked at the top of Sun Ling's head. "What are you saying? That day was just a misunderstanding. Young Master Sun, you don't have to take it to heart. Just don't recognize the wrong person in the future. It's fine that you met me and Uncle this time. If you met someone who acted arbitrarily, even if you apologized 100 times, nothing would happen." As soon as he spoke, Sun Xiangfu breathed a sigh of relief. He quickly scolded Sun Ling. "Why aren't you thanking Cheng Gongzi? Cheng Gongzi is younger than you and much more promising than you." He probably had nothing else to praise, so he said dryly, "Learn more from Cheng Gongzi in the future." Sun Ling quickly said a bunch of good things to Hien. Hien almost vomited her dinner from last night. She really did not like hearing these words. How could this fake be used to scare people? After finishing this act of the county magistrate's young master brings a bramble to ask for punishment, Sun Ling went back to his room. According to his father, Sun Ling was punished when he came home last time. He fell seriously ill and could not get out of bed. Today, he forced himself to come to Xiao Ju to ask for punishment. Now that he had done so, he had to go back to bed. Hien smiled and said, "Young Master Sun, go quickly. Don't hurt yourself." He was afraid that something bad would happen at the banquet. After all, his son looked like a troublemaker. After Sun Ling left, Sun Xiangfu said, "Military Governor Xiao, please take a seat." "Young Master Cheng, please take a seat. When the sky turns dark, there will be singing and dancing in the residence. At that time, we can enter the banquet and enjoy the dance." Hien sat down next to Xiao Ju. After that, it was Sun Xiangfu who did all the talking. There was nothing special about the conversation. It was nothing more than asking Hien and Xiao Ju if they were used to living in Liangzhou City. The weather in Liangzhou City recently. In the end, it was just some meaningless small talk. Hien's thoughts were always on Yuan Baojin. Yuan Baojin and He Rufei could be considered friends, right? At least, she had seen Yuan Baozhen enter and leave the He residence more than once. Moreover, he did not seem to be acquaintances with He Yuanxing and his son. Then, did He Rufei know that Yuan Baozhen was coming to Liangzhou City this time? He must have known. If they were good friends, perhaps they would bid each other farewell before leaving. Then, Yuan Baozhen should know about the He residence's situation and He Rufei's plans for the next few days. However, how could Yuan Baozhen say so much to her? Cheng Lisu? Tian was lost in her thoughts and forgot to hide her gaze. Yuan Baozhen was not an ordinary person. He glanced around and noticed that He Yin had been staring at him. He did not say anything and continued to listen to Sun Xiangfu's conversation with a smile. Occasionally, he would say a few words. At first glance, he looked very normal. After a while, the sky was completely dark. Sun Xiangfu stood up and said with a smile, "I think it's about time. Let's go to the main hall to enjoy the banquet." Of course, there was no objection. Sun Xiangfu walked in the front and led the way. He Yin and Xiao Ju followed behind. Yuan Baozhen was on her right. He Yin thought about He Rufei and could not help but look at Yuan Baozhen. Just as she was thinking about this, Yuan Baozhen suddenly turned his head around. He was an official and was very shrewd. At this moment, he was no longer smiling. His pair of eyes flashed with a frightening light. It was really frightening. He actually caught He Yin red-handed. He Yin was shocked. She had been discovered. Before she could say anything, she felt her arm being gently pulled. The next moment, a person stood in front of her. Xiao Ju's cold voice fell in her ears. "Watch where you're going." She looked over in surprise. Xiao Ju was taller than her, so Yuan Baozhen's horrifying gaze was completely blocked by him, and he couldn't see anything at all. Xiao Ju also looked at Yuan Baozhen and smiled. "Lord Yuan, why do you keep staring at my nephew?" Yuan Baozhen was stunned for a moment. Then he smiled and said, "Nothing. You probably saw wrong." He turned around and no longer looked at He Yin. It was as if what had just happened was just an insignificant joke. Xiao Ju continued to walk forward. He Yin was stunned for a moment before following her. However, she felt a little strange. Although the words, "my nephew," were referring to Cheng Lisu, he was protecting her. She had not felt this kind of protection in a long time. Perhaps she had never felt it before. When they arrived at the main hall, the banquet had already been set up. There were long and short tables in all four directions. He Yin sat down next to Xiao Ju. The empty space in the middle of the main hall was probably for the upcoming singing and dancing. He Yin did not understand. Why would such a banquet invite beautiful women to sing and dance in the middle to liven things up? It should be known that a true master would not bother with such things. However, Sun Xiangfu was not a true master. When he looked at the dishes on the table, He Yin could not help but be speechless. There were auspicious dragons flying in pairs, Buddha's hand golden rolls, phoenix-tailed shark's fin, dried sea cucumber. The banquets held in the residence of a third-rank official in the capital were just like this. It seemed that the Sun family was living a very comfortable life. She turned her head to look at Xiao Ju again. It had to be said that Xiao Ju usually had a cold expression on her face. She could not do this or that. However, when she sat at the banquet and lazily sat down, she lost some of her indifference. The leisurely nature in her bones was all outlined. He Yin suddenly remembered that this person was originally the real young master of the capital. When he was young, he was also like this. Today he went to the banquet. Tomorrow he would have a good night banquet. The young master's style was perfect. Thus, when he was at the banquet, he immediately had the shadow of the young master of the Xiao family. "Why are you looking at me?" Young Master Zhao's lips curled up. His voice was low and fell into He Yan's ears. "Be careful not to expose yourself." He Yan coughed lightly. "I was shocked by Uncle's grace and was distracted for a moment." She was used to flattering. Xiao Ju was too lazy to pay attention to her when she opened her mouth to speak inexplicable words. At this time, Yuan Baozhen opened his mouth. He said, "The relationship between Military Governor Xiao and young Master Cheng is very good. He's one of us." "Of course it's good," Xiao Ju replied indifferently. Yuan Baozhen originally wanted to find a topic to talk about. Of course, he did not care about Xiao Ju's attitude. He picked up the wine cup on the table and smiled. I don't understand. Liangzhou is a bitter and cold place. Military Governor Xiao is much better in the capital than here. Why is he stationed in Liangzhou? When Yin heard this, her heart moved. She was also curious about this question. Xiao Ju was now the commander-in-chief of the Right Army. The entire Nanfu army was under his control. There was no need for him to bring a new soldier here. Yin originally thought that he was demoted. However, looking at his arrogant appearance in front of Sun Xiangfu, it did not seem like he was demoted. Xiao Ju looked at Yuan Baojin. He did not answer his question. Instead, he smiled and asked, "What does Imperial Censor Yuan think I am? Why did this person kick the ball back to him again?" Yuan Baojin was also a smart person. The smile on his face did not change. He immediately used the ability that everyone in the bureaucracy had. He said, "I think that the commander-in-chief must be worried that the new soldiers will be difficult to lead. Other generals may not be able to lead them well. The commander-in-chief has never been afraid of hardships. That's why he volunteered to be stationed in Liangzhou." After a while, Xiao Ju said, "Is that so?" He asked casually, "Does Imperial Censor mean that I am here in Liangzhou is a good thing?" "Of course." Xiao Ju glanced at him and smiled indifferently. "I thought that was not what Imperial Censor Yuan wanted to say." "Oh." Yuan Baojin smiled and asked, "What does Military Governor Xiao mean by this?" "Small things are bound to fall. Big things are bound to fail." He said meaningfully, "Could it be that Imperial Censor Yuan did not personally come to Liangzhou because of this?" The atmosphere immediately froze. Sun Xiangfu did not dare to say a word. He kept his tail between his legs. Yuan Baojin almost could not maintain his smile. Yin turned to look at Xiao Ju. He could not help but praise Xiao Ju in his heart. "You compliment me, and I compliment you." This kind of talk was really meaningless. It was all a lie. Nothing useful would come out of a banquet at the end. Look at how powerful second young Master Xiao was. One sentence was enough to make others speechless. The hidden secrets of this banquet should have been laid out on the table a long time ago. Yuan Baojin paused for a moment, then smiled. Military Governor Xiao really knows how to joke. I came to Liangzhou only because I was ordered to patrol. Xiao Ju did not comment. How is the training of the new soldiers at the Commander-in-Chief's Guard? Yuan Baojin asked again. Are there good soldiers and strong formations? Xiao Ju looked at him with a half-smile. This is also one of the tasks of Imperial Censor Yuan's patrol. Although Yuan Baojin had heard of Xiao Ju's reputation in the past and had met him face-to-face, this was the first time they sat down and talked. Thus, for the first time, he truly experienced the arrogance of this young, killing general. No wonder when he killed Zhao Nuo, no matter what he said, it was useless. Just sitting down and talking with this young master was enough to make him physically and mentally exhausted. He could not maintain his usual smile for the first time. He only said, I'm just concerned. I'm afraid Imperial Censor Yuan is not only concerned about the new soldiers of Liangzhou, Xiao Ju said slowly. The South Mansion soldiers and the 9 Flags Battalion. Why don't you show some concern as well? Yuan Baojin could not respond. Sun Xiangfu looked left and right. Both of them were people he couldn't afford to offend, but he couldn't let a perfectly good banquet be filled with the glint of blades and shadows of swords. So, he nervously came out to mediate. I say, the two of you must be tired of talking. Why don't you stop and enjoy the song and dance? Eat something. This wine is from Grape Spring, newly brewed. Please have a taste. He then ordered the servant beside him, quickly calling you over. Not long after, several beautiful girls stepped into the hall. The one leading them was the servant who had led Yin and the others into the hall. At this time, she had changed her clothes. Her red dress was embroidered with plum blossoms, and her sleeves were long. Her makeup was done again. Just now, she was just a delicate beauty, but now, she looked at Xiao Ju with a dazzling radiance. Just like before, she was still looking at Xiao Ju with deep affection. There were so many people sitting here. Yin aside, Yuan Baojin was an official. Why was this girl staring at Xiao Ju alone? Wasn't her target too obvious? Yin thought to himself. He looked at Xiao Ju and saw that her eyes were as cold as ice. She was not moved at all. Yin felt that the way he looked at Fei Nu was gentler than the way he looked at this girl. Was there something wrong with Xiao Ju? For example, did she hate women? While she was thinking this, Yu had already led the other servant girls to bow and said, "We servants have embarrassed ourselves." The girl playing the zither was playing longing for a long lovesickness. The lingering melody, coupled with the beautiful girl, was a beautiful picture. Yin was a girl. Xiao Ju was not interested in singing and dancing. After being scolded by Xiao Ju, Yuan Baozhen's mind had already flown to other places. The person he was most satisfied with was probably Sun Xiangfu himself. Sun Xiangfu himself was probably very fond of this dancer, but this Miss Xingyu might also be someone who judged people by their appearance. Her long sleeves were always swayed in the direction of Xiao Ju. Her coquettish eyes could melt a person's bones, but they were always aimed at second young Master Xiao. Yin was bored to death. He even counted that Yu had thrown 5 coquettish eyes at Sun Xiangfu, 3 at Yuan Baozhen, 17 at Xiao Ju, and none at him. She was actually at the bottom. What right did she have to look down on others? Coming to a banquet was just coming to a banquet. Why did she have to attack people's confidence like this? Yin thought to himself. Maybe it wasn't her fault. Who told her to wear the wrong clothes today? This color was too dark. She reached out with her chopsticks and picked up a piece of dessert. This was Sun Xiangfu's family banquet. Sun Xiangfu probably did not have the guts to poison the food. Yin tasted it and found that it tasted pretty good. After one song, Yu's forehead was covered in sparkling sweat. The sweat of a beauty was even more moving. Her face was red as she bowed to everyone. Good, good, good. Only Sun Xiangfu was watching the dance seriously. He clapped his hands and said, "Wonderful, wonderful. What do you all think?" Xiao Ju naturally did not answer him. Yuan Baozhen also just smiled. Yin said, "It's really difficult to chase after a group of flowers. Heavenly fragrance and beauty of the country. Little young master also thinks it's good?" Sun Xiangfu looked as if he had found a confidant. He said, "Then how about giving you to young Master Cheng? That would work?" Yan's body stiffened. He waved his hand and said, No, I already have a fiancé. I'm afraid it's not appropriate." Ah! Sun Xiangfu immediately felt regretful. He said, "That's a pity. Nowadays, when officials attend banquets, it was fashionable to give beauties to the other party at any time." Was there something wrong with his head? Yin was still in disbelief when he heard Sun Xiangfu say with a smile, "Yu, then you should go and serve military Governor Xiao." Yin was speechless. She suspected that Wanhua Pavilion was opened by County Magistrate Sunday otherwise. Why would his tone and demeanor be so similar to that of a brothel keeper? Even if he was a brothel keeper, he should still have a discerning eye. How could an ordinary person not see that Xiao Ju's entire body was filled with rejection? Some people were blind, but their hearts were as clear as a mirror. Some people were still able to see, but they were already blind. Fortunately, Missing You knew her limits. She did not do anything stupid like touching Xiao Ju's hand. She only stood beside him and served him food. There was also a maidservant beside Yin, who was serving her food. She raised her head and saw Yuan Baozhen sitting opposite her. The person serving the food behind him was not a maidservant, but a person who looked like an imperial bodyguard. Strange, could it be that he was the one who hated women? Yin looked at the imperial bodyguard behind him. Originally, he was bored to death, but at first glance, he felt as if his blood was about to freeze. His entire body froze on the spot. The imperial bodyguard was not very tall. In fact, among the imperial bodyguards, he could be considered thin and short. His facial features were also extremely mediocre. When he hid behind Yuan Baozhen, he was almost hidden in the darkness, making it difficult for people to notice him. He had been silent all this time. Yin did not notice him from the moment she saw Yuan Baozhen. Now that she saw him, she felt as if she was struck by lightning. In the blink of an eye, all the dishes on the table disappeared, and the scenery flashed back to that day. She was sitting in the Su residence. Her personal servant served her a bowl of medicinal soup. She said that the kitchen specially brewed this soup for her to nourish her body. She only hoped that she could become pregnant with Lin as soon as possible and add a son to the Su family. The scenery was just right. The sun was shining brightly. She sat at the table and looked out of the window. She saw a manservant pass by. The servant smiled and explained that the medicinal ingredients used to brew the soup today were sent by this manservant. This was Rufei's manservant, a member of the He family. Heian was newly married at that time. Although he was occasionally disappointed because of Su Jiheng, he did not take it to heart. He still had a trace of warmth towards the He family. She would never have thought that the medicinal ingredients sent to nourish her body were for her eyes. That was the last time she saw sunlight in her previous life. The next day, she had a high fever that did not recede. After that, she went blind. It was only a very short glance, but she had already memorized this person's face. Now, even if he changed into an imperial bodyguard's uniform and followed beside Yuan Baozhen, she could still recognize him at a glance. Let's drink together. Sun Xiangfu raised his cup and smiled. The sparkling wine was poured into the white jade cup. She saw the man beside her raise the cup to his lips. In an instant, the past flashed before her eyes. Heian was extremely frightened. He only felt that the previous scene was about to repeat itself. Shocked and angry, he slapped away the wine cup in Xiao Ju's hand. Don't drink. Chapter 95. Don't drink. Her voice was like a sharp sword, filled with bloodlust, interrupting the joyous atmosphere of the banquet. The unforeseen event happened at this moment. Ying Yu, who was standing beside Xiao Ju, was holding a jug of wine in her hands. She had poured wine into the jug and did not have time to take it back. He Yan's voice fell. As if she had received some kind of signal, a dagger appeared under the jug of wine and, without hesitation, stabbed toward Xiao Ju. The young man's expression was calm and did not show any signs of panic. The jade cup in his hand flew out and collided with the dagger in the air, shattering into pieces and stopping the tip of the dagger. In a split second, the wind blew from all directions. The beautiful women who had just finished dancing did not all retreat. They stood to the left and right and immediately rushed toward Xiao Ju. This was a carefully planned assassination. "Uncle!" Heian called out. The young man slammed the table, and a long sword appeared in his hand. He was surrounded by more than 10 people and coldly ordered, "Hide further away." Sun Xiangfu was stunned by the sudden turn of events. He was so scared that he covered his head and hid under the table. He did not forget to shout, someone come quickly." Heian was paying attention to the bodyguard behind Yuan Baozhen. She had thought that since this person was Rufei's man, there must be a reason for him to follow behind Yuan Baozhen. However, in her anger, she only cared about the wine on the table and did not think that the women around her were assassins. Yuan Baozhen was protected by the bodyguard behind him and retreated a few steps. He looked panicked. The bodyguard did not make a move. Could it be that today's assassins were just a coincidence? Heian thought in her heart. She looked at Xiao Ju, who was surrounded, and almost exploded in anger. The assassins were all women. Whether it was the women who had just danced or the women who had played the zither, each of them had light bodies. They looked gentle and soft, but their attacks were vicious. Hidden in their sleeves were hidden arrows. With a wave of their sleeves, the hidden weapons flew toward Xiao Ju. In such a big banquet, Xiao Ju was the only one who could fight against 10 people. No matter if it was Yan's previous life on the battlefield or this life in the martial arts practice field, he had always been open and above board. When had he ever seen such underhanded methods? For a moment, he was filled with righteous indignation. Seeing the small knife used to cut the roasted venison on the table, he grabbed it and rushed into the crowd. "Uncle, I'll help you." Heian was halfway through her words when she suddenly remembered that she was Chung Li Su. How could the useless young master of the Shuo capital know martial arts? She was afraid that she would not be able to openly show her martial arts skills. She shouted her heart. She shouted, "Why are these people's sleeves so long? She's SSSSS, cut, SSSSS." The water sleeves instantly turned into short sleeves. When he used the concealed weapon again, his movements were very obvious. Just like that, Ian shouted as she circled around the crowd. Her figure was light and graceful, as slippery as a loach. Everyone wanted to catch her, but they couldn't. The young man was screaming and cursing at the same time, making the scene somewhat comical. Xiao Ju swung her sword to block the knife of the woman in front of her. She turned her head and glanced at her. Yin was still shouting, "Help! Murder!" She blocked a dart in front of her and kicked the face of the woman next to her. Xiao Ju's mouth twitched. The target of the singing girls was Xiao Ju. All their sinister methods and hidden weapons were aimed at Xiao Ju. Now that a young man had suddenly appeared, everything was disrupted. Yu's face was ashen. She clenched her fist and said hatefully, "Despicable." She chopped at Yin's head. Yin shouted, "Aya," and hid behind Xiao Ju. "Uncle, save me." She was shocked. These 10 or so women were all very skilled. It was not something that could be trained overnight. This kind of technique was more like a death squad that was specially trained to kill people. Who did Xiao Ju offend? Why would they use such a method to kill him? Among this group of women, Yu was the most skilled. But it was not the most skilled. She had countless hidden weapons. Date seed arrows, plum blossom needles, amay thorns, iron lotus. Yin did not know how she could store so many hidden weapons in her sleeves. However, Xiao Ju did not seem to want to take the man's life. The tip of her sword avoided the vital points. Yin knew that when he was young, his sword skills were outstanding. Now that they met again, this was the first time he saw him in action. The assassin could not get close. He was injured by the autumn sword and fell to the ground. He pulled Yu's sleeve. Yu was pulled forward. In the next moment, the tip of his sword was pointed at Yu's throat. The young man's voice was low. It was more pleasant than the sound of the zither. It contained an unconcealable murderous intent. "Who sent you?" Yin could not help but look at the bodyguard behind Yuan Baozhen. The bodyguard was standing in front of Yuan Baozhen. His face, which was hidden in the dark, was now revealed. His expression was also very flustered, as if he didn't expect this to happen and couldn't see any clues. However, Yin saw that his index finger slowly bent into a semicircle. No one would pay attention to a bodyguard at this time. The movement of his finger was extremely small. If Yin had not been paying attention to him, he would have missed it. Her intuition, which had been cultivated for many years, made her subconsciously turn around to look. She saw the manservant, who had been hiding at the door, pouncing toward Xiao Ju. "Be careful." Xiao Ju was pointing at Yu. Yin did not care about anything else. He pushed Xiao Ju away. The man who had pounced in front of Xiao Ju was stabbed in the throat by Xiao Ju. The assassins had always been women. Who would pay attention to this manservant? Moreover, from the very first moment of the incident, this person had been hiding under the short table like any other weak servant. Who would have thought that he would be the last chess piece? "What's the matter?" Xiao Ju frowned and asked her. Yin shook his head. Yu, who was on the ground, suddenly laughed. In the dead silence, her laughter was particularly ear-piercing. Yin turned his head to look. The beauty's lips were bleeding, but her expression was ruthless. Yin took a step forward and asked, "Who are you? Why do you want to harm my uncle?" Yu looked at Yin with a fierce expression. "If you did not come out to mess things up, this would not have happened. You'll never know who my master is." She coughed up more and more blood. The blood that flowed out was an abnormal black color. He looked at the women around her and saw that they were all the same. Yin understood. She was indeed a death warrior. Once the assassination failed, she would commit suicide. "Is that so?" Xiao Ju looked at Yu and suddenly smiled. His eyes were full of ridicule as he said, "There are countless people in the world who want to kill me. But there is only one person who is so impatient. I'll accept your master's gift. I hope that your master can accept my gift in return." Yu's expression changed greatly, but she had already taken the poison. In just a moment, her face turned ashen. Like the other 10 women, she died and no longer breathed. Xiao Ju stepped over her body and stood in the middle of the hall. He looked at Sun Xiangfu, who was hiding under the low table and trembling in fear. He reprimanded, "Magistrate Sun, why don't you explain why the servants in your residence tried to assassinate me during your banquet? Are you deliberately trying to harm me?" Sun Xiangfu had long been so scared that his mind was in a mess. When he heard this, he almost cried. Seeing that the assassin was gone, he dared to stand up from the short table and hurriedly explained, "Commander-in-Chief, I really didn't know. I really didn't know. Even if I had 10 times the courage, I would not dare to harm you. I only brought these singers back to the residence half a month ago. I didn't know they were assassins. Magistrate Yuan, Magistrate Yuan, please help me explain. I really don't know what is going on. Yuan Baozhen, who had been silent all this time, also came back to his senses. He patted his chest and said with lingering fear, Magistrate's son, this is not a matter of whether you know or not. These singers are all people in your residence. If something really happened to Military Governor Xiao today, you will not be able to escape responsibility. I think this matter is not as simple as it seems on the surface. Let's clean up this place first and ask a coroner to see where these people came from and what their identities are. He then looked at Xiao Ju. Military Governor Xiao is also frightened. Why don't you clean up first and change to another place? Let Magistrate's son explain what is going on. I think these singers have come prepared. Xiao Ju looked at him with a smile that was not a smile and said, Okay. The banquet came to an abrupt end in the middle of the night, but at this moment, no one was in the mood to continue. The hall was a mess. The coroner and bailiffs quickly came over and carried the bodies of the singers away. Yuan Baozhen asked, Do you want to search their bodies to see if they have any keepsakes? Since they have been in the Sun residence for half a month, the keepsakes should have been hidden well. Why would they leave it on their bodies for people to search? If they really do have it, I'm afraid they're trying to frame someone else. Xiao Ju stared at Yuan Baozhen and said lightly, Magistrate Yuan, don't fall into their trap. Yuan Baozhen's scalp tightened. Xiao Ju did not pay attention to him anymore. He turned his head and saw He Yin standing there in a daze. He suddenly remembered that she seemed to have not said anything since just now. Was she frightened? Why are you standing there in a daze? Let's go, he said to He Yin. As soon as he finished speaking, he felt his sleeve being pulled. Uncle. The young man raised his head. The smile on his face was gone, and there was a rare trace of nervousness. His gaze was also blank. It fell on his face, as if he was not looking at him. He said, Just now when the servant rushed over, I pushed you away. He scattered a handful of things on my face. My eyes hurt a little. His voice was small, and it was not as arrogant as before. He was a little flustered. I think I can't see. The doctors went in one by one and quickly came out. They all looked terrified. Everyone shook their heads and sighed. Xiao Ju's face became more and more gloomy. Sun Xiangfu watched from the side with fear. Who would have thought that Xiao Ju's nephew, the young man who always followed Xiao Ju, would have his eyes injured by an assassin? The doctors could only open his eyelids to take a look. The young man only said that he could not see. There were no godly doctors in Liangzhou City, and all the doctors that could be found were all useless. The powder on the ground had long been blown away by the wind, leaving no trace behind. They did not even know what kind of poison it was, so how could they treat it? Fortunately, only the young man's eyes were injured. The rest of his body was fine. Otherwise, if his life was threatened, the governor would be furious. Governor, Sun Xiangfu said, This official will go and find another doctor. The young master is a good person, and he will be fine. Xiao Ju said, Get lost. Everyone could hear the anger in his words. Sun Xiangfu did not dare to anger Xiao Ju at this juncture. He hurriedly said a few words and hurriedly left as if he was running for his life. Xiao Ju stood outside the room. He paused for a moment and then walked in. He happened to pass by the last doctor. He saw the young man sitting on the bed with a calm expression. He did not know what he was thinking. After a moment, he used his hands to gesture in front of his face, as if he could not believe that he could not see. Because she had cried out in pain, the doctor did not dare to use any medicine. He only found some soothing and cooling herbs and applied them on a clean cloth. He used the cloth to cover her eyes. He had always been cheerful. Sometimes he was smart, sometimes he was stupid. As for whether he was really stupid or just pretending to be stupid, no one knew. His eyes were very clever. They were clear and bright. When he stared, he looked a little silly. When he curved his eyes, they were full of vitality and slyness. Now that the cloth covered her eyes, The young man's face became unfamiliar in an instant. Even his previous lively expressions seemed to be blurred. Xiao Ju suddenly remembered that during the banquet, when Yu and the others tried to assassinate him, Yin did not waver when he rushed over. Even if Yin did not mention it, he would not drink the wine poured by Yu. However, the fear and anger in the young man's voice did not seem to be fake. It even made people's hearts tremble. He walked in and stopped in front of Yan's bed. Yan seemed to feel something, but he was not sure. He tilted his head and asked carefully, "Is someone here?" Xiao Ju did not say anything. "Is there no one?" She whispered again and turned her head to the side to be quiet. On the way to Liangzhou City, Yan was very talkative. Xiao Ju did not talk to her, so she went to look for Fei Nu. Fei Nu did not talk much. Song Taodao, who appeared later, took over this vacancy. When a person who was always chattering suddenly became quiet, people would not be used to it. This young man was only 16 years old, but he was different from ordinary people. When he found out that he could not see, he was a little flustered. However, he did not wail or cry. It was as if he quickly accepted this fact. However, when he sat quietly, it made people feel a little sorry for him. It was probably because he was too thin and weak. Looking at him like this, he looked very pitiful. Xiao Ju asked, "How do you feel?" "All, uncle?" Tian was surprised for a moment, then said, "I'm just not used to it." She reached out as if she wanted to touch her eyes, but what she touched was a piece of cloth. She immediately retracted her hand and said, "Are my eyes really blind?" Even when he asked this, his tone was calm. Xiao Ju should have said yes, but at this moment, he actually could not say it. This young man with extraordinary skills was at the prime of his life. With his talent, he would definitely be promoted in a few years in the Liangzhou City Guards. A pearl in a puddle of muddy water would not be buried no matter what. However, losing a pair of eyes was a different situation. Not to mention the impact it would have on the future. It would take courage for him to get used to these dark days. After all, it was not as if he could not see from the moment he was born. Having something and then losing it was much more unbearable than not having it in the first place. "Uncle, you're not sad for me, are you?" Ian suddenly asked. Although his eyes were covered by a piece of cloth, the tone in which he said this made one imagine that if it were any other time, her eyes would be wide open and filled with mischief and ridicule. "Maybe you're still blaming yourself?" She smiled and said, "Actually, you don't have to blame yourself for me. You should praise me. Maybe if you praise me, I'll think that everything I've done was worth it." "Praise you for what?" Xiao Ju said indifferently. "Of course you're praising me for being amazing." The young man's voice was a little surprised, but also a little proud. "If I didn't remind you not to drink just now, this assassination attempt would not have happened. I'm your savior. Am I not amazing?" She still had the heart to think about these things at a time like this. Xiao Ju was speechless. He did not know whether to say that this young man was careless or that he really did not care. "You don't seem to be sad," Xiao Ju said. "You can't see. Maybe you'll never be able to see again." As soon as she said this, the young man's fingers curled up. Although it was very subtle, Xiao Ju still caught it. He was afraid, and it was not as easy as he made it seem. "God won't be so bad to me, right?" Ian said, "I've never done anything bad in my life. Why are you treating me like this? If you really want to treat me like this, then I can't do anything. There are many kinds of blind people. I'm so good, so I'll be the best of them all." Xiao Ju was slightly startled. This sentence sounded strangely familiar, as if he had heard it a long time ago. "But uncle, are you going to give up so early? I think you should find me a few more doctors to take a look at me. Maybe I can be cured." "Why do you say it as if it's incurable?" he asked. Xiao Ju looked at him. Although the young man tried his best to appear normal, he was still a little tired. He said, "Have a good rest." Then he turned and left. Xiao Ju left the room, and the room returned to its original calm. Because there might be assassins in the house, all the servants in the house were evacuated. Only Fei Nu, one of Xiao Ju's own men, remained in the courtyard. Tian stretched out his hand, as if he wanted to untie the knot in his head. After a while, he put down his hand and did not continue. She lowered her head and muttered, "Ding Yi." Yuan Baojian's bodyguard, he Rufei's former servant, the person who personally gave her a bowl of poison in her previous life. She heard Yuan Baojian call his name. His name was Ding Yi. In the study, Sun Xiangfu's face was scrunched up. He was about to cry. The person sitting in front of him was Yuan Baojian. Yuan Baojian said, "Magistrate Sun, I can't help you with this. Magistrate Yuan, you can't leave me in the lurch. Right now, the only person who can help me is you." Sun Xiangfu said with a sad face, "I really don't know what happened to those assassins today. Now that the commander-in-chief is angry and young Master Cheng can't see, Commander-in-Chief Xiao will definitely vent his anger on this lowly official. I'm just a county magistrate. How can I bear the anger of General Feng Yun?" Sun Xiangfu had personally witnessed the close relationship between Xiao Ju and Cheng Lisu, this pair of uncle and nephew. When Cheng Lisu and Sun Ling got into an argument, Xiao Ju rushed over to protect Cheng Lisu. It was truly frightening. At that time, it was just a small argument. Now that Cheng Lisu was blind, wouldn't Xiao Ju pay with her life? Sun Xiangfu thought of this and began to tremble. "I don't think Military Governor Xiao is such an unreasonable person," Yuan Baojian comforted. As the two were talking, Xiao Ju arrived. Sun Xiangfu didn't have time to beg Yuan Baojian. He lifted his robe and knelt in front of Xiao Ju. "What is the meaning of this?" Xiao Ju looked at him coldly and asked, "Governor, I really don't know what is going on right now. I was also tricked by them. Even if I had 100 times the courage, I wouldn't dare to harm you." Sun Xiangfu began to cry out his innocence. "Stand up." Xiao Ju glanced at him as if she didn't like his actions. She walked in and sat down on the chair at the head of the table. She looked at him and said, "Tell me how you met them." She paused and then added, "Those assassins." This she believed that he wasn't the mastermind? When Sun Xiangfu noticed this, he was overjoyed. Yuan Baojian's eyes flashed, but he didn't make a sound. Sun Xiangfu hurriedly stood up. He didn't even brush off the dust on his robe and retreated to a lower chair to sit down. In this way, he and Yuan Baojian sat in a position where Xiao Ju was the leader. Sun Xiangfu wiped the sweat from his forehead and said, "Actually, they have only been in the Fu for half a month." At first, there was a new opera troupe in the city. The leader of this opera troupe was an old woman. She brought a group of beautiful girls to the city. She said that there was a drought in the place where they lived, and there was no way to survive, so they moved to Liangzhou City. They set up a stage in the east of Liangzhou City and performed 3 times a day. In the beginning, only commoners came to take a look. Not only were these girls beautiful, but they also sang very well. They were very eye-catching and gradually became famous. Many nobles also came to know about them. After a while, the news reached Sun Ling's ears. Sun Ling had touched all the beautiful girls in Liangzhou City. The night Sun Ling watched the show, he asked someone to buy the group of girls to perform in the Fu. The leader of the troupe, the old woman, refused and was injured by Sun Ling's servants. When she was about to be beaten to death, Yu stood up and said that she was willing to persuade her sisters to enter the Fu. She only hoped that Sun Ling would let their leader go. Sun Ling generously did as he was told. Yu really managed to persuade the group of girls. After entering the Fu, they were very gentle. After entering the Sun Fu, Sun Ling found that this group of girls not only knew how to sing, but were also proficient in the 4 arts. Among them, Yu was the most outstanding. Sun Xiangfu also knew about Yu. Sun Xiangfu was different from Sun Ling. Sun Ling only knew how to eat, drink, and play, but Sun Xiangfu was a bit ambitious. Being the county magistrate of Liangzhou City was good, but what if he could go further? Even if he didn't take another step forward, the position of county magistrate wasn't really stable. He had to bribe people from top to bottom. He had to maintain good relations with both familiar and unfamiliar people. For example, he wasn't very familiar with the new commander of the Liang Province Guards. Sun Xiangfu asked Yu to come. He had Yu hold a banquet in the Fu to liven things up for the guests. In any case, there were 2 guests, Imperial Censor Yuan Baojian and Right Army Commander Xiao Ju. As long as he got on the good side of one of them, he could rest easy. Although Sun Ling was a bit dissatisfied, there was nothing he could do. In the days that followed, Inyu seriously brought her sisters to practice dancing and singing. Every time Sun Xiangfu went over to watch, he was very satisfied. This servant was also very smart. When she entered the fu for the leader of the troop, she was a bit unwilling. After experiencing the extravagance of the Sun Fu, she became even more clever. Sometimes, when Sun Xiangfu talked to her, he could feel her desire for power. That's right. People walk to higher places while water flows to lower places. This was the case for everyone, men and women alike. Up until tonight's incident at the banquet, Sun Xiangfu still thought this way. When he talked about these things, probably because he was embarrassed, he added a bit of embellishment. However, without those unimportant embellishments, it was just one thing. Sun Ling was lustful, but who knew that he would pick up a poisonous snake? I really didn't think that they were assassins. Women? How can women be assassins? Sun Xiangfu said. It wasn't clear whether he was saying this to Xiao Ju or to himself. To the father and son of the Sun family, women had always been playthings, or things that were sent to win the favor of their superiors. Now that he had been played by a woman, it was hard to describe his feelings at the moment. These assassins entered the fu half a month ago. Xiao Ju asked. Sun Xiangfu nodded. That's right. This is all my fault. I didn't carefully check their identities. I only thought that they were women who had no relatives in the city and were weak and pitiful. So he tried his best to say that he took pity on their weakness and brought them into the fu. But Xiao Ju didn't pay any attention to him. She only played with the teacup in her hand and said lightly, half a month ago, Magistrate Sun didn't send me an invitation to the fu. Sun Xiangfu paused. But half a month ago, Official Yuan should have known that you would arrive in Liangzhou. He tilted his head and looked at Yuan Baozhen with a half-smile. Hearing this, Yuan Baozhen replied with a smile. What does Governor mean? Are you suspecting me? Governor, why don't you think about it? If I really arranged for these women, how could I be sure that Magistrate Sun would take them back to the fu? I can't predict things like a god. Of course you can't predict things like a god. Xiao Ju's lips curved slightly and said unhurriedly. You only need to write a letter to Magistrate Sunday. She was saying that Yuan Baozhen and Sun Xiangfu had set this up together. Sun Xiangfu finally thought that he had cleared himself of suspicion, but Xiao Ju's words immediately made him sweat profusely. He hurriedly waved his hand and said, No, Governor, I really didn't. I don't know what's going on. I also didn't receive a letter from Official Yuan. Yuan Baozhen also stopped smiling. He looked at Xiao Ju and said seriously, Governor, with just one sentence, you have convicted me and Magistrate Sun, but you don't even have evidence. It really makes one's heart cold. I don't have any deep enmity with you, and this is the first time I've eaten with you. How could I harm you? He was born with a kind face, and his words were very sincere, but there was also a hint of sadness at being misunderstood. Xiao Ju stared at him for a while. After a moment, he smiled and said indifferently, It's just a joke. Official Yuan doesn't need to take it seriously. He withdrew his smile and became cold again. He was like a knife that was about to be unsheathed, hiding the fierceness of a mountain storm. However, there are many suspicious points in this matter. Before I figure it out, I'm afraid I'll have to disturb you for a few days, he said. Governor, you're going to live here? After the assassination attempt, normal people would only feel that this place was not safe and would leave as soon as possible to avoid being schemed against again. Why was he still staying here? Yes, the young governor put down his teacup and stood up. He was tall and slender, and his eyes were slightly cold. Live here and catch the thief. Chapter 96. At night, there was a row of soldiers standing in front of Sun Fu's gate. It did not make sense to use soldiers to guard his own gate. However, Sun Xiangfu was like a bird that was startled by the twang of a bow. He did not care so much. All of the servants in the fu were interrogated one by one. For the time being, nothing suspicious was found. Right Army Governor Xiao Ju and Imperial Censor Yuan Baozhen both lived in the fu. Sun Xiangfu also noticed the undercurrent under these two's calmness. He sat in the room and sighed. Sun Ling had already learned the whole story from the servants and said, "Father, why are you still worried about this?" Sun Xiang felt extremely lucky. If you hadn't been so meddlesome and brought those women back to the residence, none of this would have happened. Father, I took them back to the Fu for my own use. I did not ask you to use them to entertain guests. Sun Ling could not take it anymore and rolled his eyes. Now that there is trouble, how can you blame me? Those women are useless. If they wanted to assassinate someone, they should have succeeded in one try. Who knows who will benefit if they die for nothing? Before he finished, Sun Ling's mouth was covered by Sun Xiangfu, who rushed over. Sun Xiangfu looked around and scolded, "Do you want to die? Saying such things." "I did not say anything wrong." Sun Ling moved closer and said in a low voice, "Father, do you also not like that Xiao Ju?" Sun Xiangfu did not speak. Was this a question of whether he liked her or not? Compared to whether he liked Xiao Ju or not, he should be more worried about whether Xiao Ju liked him or not. I heard that military Governor Xiao and Darren Yuan seem to have some disagreements. When the two of them fight, you just need to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. Darren Yuan is not bad and is friendly. You can help him secretly. The enemy of an enemy is a friend. Sun Ling said, "If something really happens in the end, you will have gotten rid of Xiao Ju and become friends with Darren Yuan. Wouldn't that be killing two birds with one stone?" He thought his words made sense. Sun Xiangfu suddenly slapped him on the head. Sun Xiangfu scolded, "How can it be as simple as you say? You didn't see it today. Xiao Ju." He thought of something, and fear flashed across his eyes. She's not easy to deal with. Inside the room, Yuan Baojin sat in front of the table, his expression uncertain. The average-looking guard was standing behind him, but his eyes were also flickering. "Xiao Ju is suspicious of me." After a moment, Yuan Baojin said, "If today's matter doesn't work, I'm afraid there won't be another chance." "Why would he suspect you?" The bodyguard, the man named Ding Yi, asked. "I don't know." Thinking of what happened in Sun Xiangfu's study, Yuan Baojin was angry. Xiao Ju's suspicion was blatant, and her tone was arrogant. He did not know how to respond. He had just arrived in Liangzhou City and had never interacted with Xiao Ju before. No matter what, Xiao Ju should not suspect him. Also, how could Cheng Lisu be blind? Yuan Baojin frowned. Was this also arranged in advance? Ding Yi shook his head. "I've never heard of it." There was no point in suspecting him. Now that all the assassins were dead, no one was alive. Even if he was full of questions, there was no one to answer. "That Cheng Lisu is a bit strange," Ding Yi said. "If he hadn't stopped them today, perhaps Xiao Ju would have drunk the poison wine." With his reminder, Yuan Baojin remembered something. At the banquet tonight, when Xiao Ju raised her wine cup, Cheng Lisu's shout of "Don't drink it" came suddenly and loudly, causing the assassins to act prematurely. If he hadn't stopped them, they wouldn't be in such a difficult situation now. How did he know that the wine was poisoned? Yuan Baojin muttered. After a moment, he stroked the oil lamp on the table and said, "Since Xiao Ju and the others are in the residence, this is our chance. I'll test Cheng Lisu tomorrow. If this young man is really blind, maybe we can use him to tie down Xiao Ju and save the country." He Yin didn't know that in these invisible places, there was a surging undercurrent. At this moment, she was sitting in the room, arguing with Fei Nu. After her eyes were damaged, Xiao Ju called Fei Nu to guard He Yan's room. After all, there were already assassins in the Sun residence. Who knew if there would be more hidden people among the servants? He Yan didn't feel at ease if he was alone. With Fei Nu guarding, it was much safer. "Brother Fei Nu, please leave. I can really do it myself." He Yan had a headache. "You can't see." Fei Nu's reply was very stiff. "Young master asked me to guard you. Then you can just guard the door. If you were to be my personal servant, I would be very uncomfortable." He Yan replied seriously, "Can you leave? Forgive me for not being able to comply. Why are you the same as your master? Can't you be more reasonable?" Xiao Ju had just arrived at the door when he heard this sentence. He stopped and stood at the door. "What happened?" Fei Nu said, "Young master." Without waiting for Fei Nu to finish speaking, He Yan had already looked in the direction of the door. Her eyes were still covered with cloth, and her hands were clutching some clothes. Is Uncle here? Brother Fei Nu is crazy. He wants to help me bathe? Fei Nu's lips moved. He seemed to be speechless at her insulted expression. He explained, he can't see. I'm afraid. Uncle, it's not like you don't know that I have a fiancé. My body is as clean as ice and as clean as jade. How can it be seen by others? That young man's voice was bright and cheerful. The desolation and panic from before had already been swept away, and he was back to his usual unreasonable appearance. If I were to break up because of your marriage, Big Brother Fei Nu, would you be able to compensate me with a fiancé? She muttered, You don't even have one yourself. Fei Nu. Xiao Zhu looked at her and mocked, Are you sure you won't drown? The bathtub was placed behind the screen in the middle of the room. The water was not deep. Perhaps it was because the days in the Sun residence were so extravagant that there was a circle of flower petals scattered on top of it. Hien had never used such an exquisite flower bath when she was a woman. Now that she was a man, she actually used it. Uncle, did you forget that in Liangzhou, I could shoot a sparrow in the sky blindfolded? How can I drown? Hien said, Don't worry. Besides, if I really become blind, I can't let others do things for me for the rest of my life. Uncle, you have that possibility, but I'd better forget about it. Fei Nu was also speechless. He had seen many brothers in the Nine Banners Battalion. Occasionally, there would be some who were missing an arm or a leg. Although they could pass their days with a smile, in any case, they would be depressed for a period of time. Hien was the first person he had ever seen to recover from this kind of mood. If it were not for the cloth covering her face, people would wonder if she was really blind. Xiao Zhu saw that she was full of vigor, so she did not feel like paying attention to her. She only said to Fei Nu, Come out. Fei Nu followed Xiao Zhu out. Hien finally breathed a sigh of relief when the door was closed. She did not remove the cloth covering her face. She took off her clothes and entered the bathtub, soaking her whole body in the water. If someone else was here, they would be surprised. She did this just like any other ordinary person. Her movements were without the slightest hesitation, as if she could see everything. The temperature of the water was just right. She had always bathed in the river next to the city guard station. The river water was ice cold, so it was not as comfortable as this. However, even though it was comfortable, she did not dare to be greedy. The steam rose and blurred her figure. The smile on Hien's face also relaxed. She thought that she would be attending the banquet, but she did not expect that she would have to stay here for a few more days. In this way, coupled with the fact that she could not see, there would be more people serving her. She would have to be more careful of her identity being exposed. She still remembered Ding Yi's last movement at the banquet. That subtle movement of bending his finger. If she had not been staring at Ding Yi, she would have missed it. But because she recognized Ding Yi, she knew that the servant who rushed out to attack Xiao Zhu was arranged by Ding Yi. Then, this matter became very strange. Ding Yi was He Rufei's servant. Yuan Baozhen was also He Rufei's friend. Ding Yi colluded with the assassins at the banquet to assassinate Xiao Zhu. In a way, it could be said that it was He Rufei's idea. But why did He Rufei want to kill Xiao Zhu? In her previous life, when she was He Rufei, she and Xiao Zhu did not interfere with each other's business. They were even classmates in the Xianchang gymnasium, so they could be considered friends. Now that He Rufei had returned to his original self, he did not have any enmity with Xiao Zhu. Why would he use such a vicious method to kill Xiao Zhu? Perhaps she should go talk to Yuan Baozhen. At night, Hien and Xiao Zhu slept in the same room as Fei Nu. Because they were afraid that there would be other assassins in the Sun residence, they did not separate. However, there were many courtyards in the Sun residence. This room was divided into an inner room and an outer room. Naturally, second young master, Xiao, lived in the inner room. In the outer room, Fei Nu and Hien each slept on one side of the outer room. Hien felt that this way of sleeping was as if she was protecting Xiao Zhu. Thinking about how she was injured because of Xiao Zhu, she did not expect that she would not even be able to sleep on the inner room. Thinking about it, she really felt that it was not worth it. However, she did not think for long before Hien fell asleep. This sleep was actually very peaceful. Early the next morning, Hien was woken up by Fei Nu. She sat up. Her eyes were filled with darkness. She subconsciously asked, "What time is it?" 7 in the morning. Fei Nu replied, "Oh." Hien touched the cloth covering her eyes again. This time, she directly untied it. From darkness to light, if one was able to see, they would definitely have to squint their eyes to adapt. However, Hien only opened her eyes and did not feel the slightest bit of discomfort. Fei Nu's heart sank. She asked, "Can you see?" Hien blankly shook her head. There was a moment of silence. "Maybe it will be fine in a few days." Fei Nu clumsily comforted her. He did not sympathize with Hien. However, he heard that during the banquet last night, Hien not only reminded Xiao Ju, but also personally helped Xiao Ju deal with the assassins. These were two different things. Although this young man's identity was suspicious, he had not harmed Xiao Ju so far. "Is Uncle not here?" Hien asked. Young master went out. Hien nodded again. After thinking for a while, she covered her eyes with the cloth again. Fei Nu was surprised. "Why are you wearing it again?" The herbal medicine had already been used for a day and was no longer effective. Today, Hien did not complain that her eyes hurt, so the cloth was useless. Wearing it was actually uncomfortable. "It's better to wear it to remind others that I can't see now." Hien smiled. "People have to be more tolerant towards a blind person. I can't avoid others, but others can avoid me, right?" Between wearing the cloth and not wearing it, it was obvious that the former looked more like a blind person. Fei Nu's heart trembled. It was as if something flashed through his mind. After a moment, he did not say anything. He only said, "Let's go and eat first." Hien nodded. Xiao Ju was not here. After Fei Nu and Hien freshened up, they sat in the room and ate. The food was also bought by Fei Nu in advance. Hien did not want Fei Nu to help him. He ate very slowly, but his movements were steady. He did not spill the soup. The maids that Sun Xiangfu called were all dismissed. With Xiao Ju as an example, Hien did not dare to trust any of the maids here. After eating, Fei Nu ordered the maids to clear away the leftovers on the table. Hien sat alone for less than a moment when someone's voice sounded. The footsteps were very light. If it was not for her excellent hearing, it would be difficult for ordinary people to hear. It was not one person, but two people. Xiao Ju did not need to be like this. When Fei Nu left, Hien already knew who it was. However, she did not show it on her face. She still sat quietly, as if in a daze. The footsteps fell in front of her. It seemed that the person was carefully observing her. Hien's eyes were covered with the cloth and did not move. After a while, the person did not seem to find any flaws. Suddenly he said, "Young Master Chung." "Ah!" Hien jumped in fright and almost fell from the chair. She stood up in a hurry and knocked her foot on the table leg. She cried out in pain. Someone came to help her and said, "Are you okay?" Hien opened her hands and grabbed randomly. She said, "Who is it?" He grabbed the corner of a person's clothes. That person comforted her kindly. "I am Yuan Baozhen. I'm not a bad person. Young master, don't worry." Hien calmed down and breathed a sigh of relief. She said with lingering fear, "So it is Imperial Censor Yuan. I thought it was those assassins again. I was scared to death. Why didn't you say anything when you came in?" I am sorry. I did not expect to scare young master." Yuan Baozhen said with a smile. "I heard that young master is blind, so I came to see you." When he said this, although his tone was concerned and distressed, there was no smile on his face. He stared at Hien's expression, as if he wanted to see whether Hien was really blind or not. However, Hien's eyes were covered with cloth and could not see anything. If one could not see a person's eyes, it would be difficult to see through their expressions. His head was leaning to the extreme. Normal people might not be able to notice this, but Hien could clearly feel it. The person she grabbed was Ding Yi. Yuan Baozhen was greedy for life and afraid of accidents, so he would not go forward directly. However, his eyes were like maggots in a tarsal bone. It was hard to ignore. Even so, Hien did not show it at all. She seemed to be a little distressed, but with a youthful indifference, she said, "Yes, I can't see now." However, Uncle said that he would find a godly doctor to cure me, so it should only be temporary. It would have been better if she did not say this. Once she said this, it almost made people believe that she really could not see. This was because the title of godly doctor carried a kind of comforting and perfunctory meaning. It was used to coax children. Yuan Baozhen sat down on a chair next to her. He shook his head and sighed. I did not expect young master to be injured on this trip. Fortunately, no life was harmed, and Military Governor Xiao is also fine. As he said this, he seemed to think of something. He looked at Yi Yin and asked in confusion, Young master, last night at the banquet, how did you know that there was an assassin at that time and did not let the governor drink that cup of wine? No one knew whether that cup of wine was poisonous or not. Therefore, Yuan Baozhen asked very coincidentally and did not mention the wine at all. He only said that there was an assassination. Yi Yin sneered in her heart. He was testing her. She raised her head, as if she did not know where Yuan Baozhen was. She hesitated for a moment before saying, I did not know there was an assassin at that time. I only saw a flying insect fly in Uncle's wine cup. Ding Yi and Yuan Baozhen did not expect this answer. The two of them were stunned at the same time. Yuan Baozhen asked, Flying insect? That's right. You don't know, but my uncle loves cleanliness. Yi Yin sighed. If his clothes are stained with dust, he will immediately change them. If his shoes are stained with mud, he will never wear them a second time. There are flying insects in the wine cup. If he drank it, I don't know how angry he would be. At that time, I only wanted to remind him not to drink it and change the cup. Who knew that there would be an assassin? I was also shocked. So this was the reason? Yuan Baozhen was somewhat skeptical. At that time, Cheng Lisu's scream was so shrill and anxious that it made his heart tighten. So this was the reason? But if it was not for this reason, how could he, a young master who did not know anything, predict the future and know that there was a problem with the wine? Perhaps it was really a coincidence that he had stumbled upon it? Yuan Baozhen did not know what to feel. Who would have known that a good game of chess would be ruined here? His heart was half angry and half suspicious. When he looked at Cheng Lisu again, he only felt that this young man was annoying. But Cheng Lisu clearly did not know how annoying he was. Instead, she seemed to be particularly close to Yuan Baozhen because he came to see him. She smiled and said, I heard from my uncle that Imperial Censor Yuan came from Shuajing. That's right. Then does Imperial Censor Yuan know General Fei Hong? He Rufei? She asked. When she said this, the room was silent for a moment. Ding Yi, who was very close to Yi Yin, placed his hand on the long sword at his waist. In an instant, a murderous aura rushed towards him. The young man did not make up his mind. With a smile on his face, he looked in Yuan Baozhen's direction and waited for his answer. After a moment, Yuan Baozhen stared at Yi Yan's face and asked, Little Gongzi, why did you suddenly ask about General Fei Hong? Doesn't everyone say that General Fei Hong and my uncle are sworn enemies, and that their skills and achievements are on par? I have never seen General Fei Hong before, so I don't know how his skills are, and I don't know how he looks. Since Imperial Censor Yuan came from Shuajing and is also an official of the same court, perhaps you have seen him before. I heard that he used to wear a mask. Now that he has taken off his mask, what do you think? Is he good-looking? The Cheng Lisu in front of him spoke in a light tone. She did not know that the bodyguard beside her had almost pulled out his sword and asked the same question as those naughty young men from Shuajing. Yuan Baozhen let out a sigh of relief. For a moment, he thought that this young man had discovered something and almost wanted to kill him. I've seen him before. He is born very handsome. However, he cannot be compared to Military Governor Xiao. Yuan Baozhen replied with a smile. Not as good as my uncle? Yi Yin was disappointed and quickly said, Then, is Imperial Censor Yuan close to General Fei Hong? If they are close, when I return to Shuajing in the future, can you introduce me to General Fei Hong? I have heard many of his deeds, and want to see for myself what kind of person he is. She said in a small voice, But this matter must not be known by my uncle. I am afraid that he will punish me by making me copy books. Little Gongzi, I am afraid you will be disappointed. Yuan Baozhen shook his head and said, General Fei Hong and I only know each other and are not close. If you want to introduce me, it would be better to have Military Governor Xiao introduce you to him." Tian whispered, "How would I dare to let him introduce me to him?" As she said this, Yuan Baozhen looked at her and suddenly said, "I came today because I was afraid that little Gongzi would be sad because of your eyes. But now that I have seen you, it seems that I worried too much. Little Gongzi does not seem to be very sad." Tian asked curiously, "Why does Imperial Censor Yuan say this? Last night, I cried for 2 whole hours. If it was not for my uncle scolding me and saying that he would throw me out if I did not shut up, you would not be able to see me now. Moreover, I later understood who I was. I was the young master of the right sector's Naolang residence. Although I didn't know anything, my uncle was the right army's commander-in-chief. As long as my uncle was around, I would definitely be able to see. My uncle said that there will be a godly doctor that can cure my eyes. There will definitely be a godly doctor that can cure my eyes." Her words were full of worship and trust toward Xiaoju. Yuan Baozhen was speechless and did not know what to say. Tian's words were watertight and did not find any loopholes. But he was still worried. Little Gongzi is right. Military Governor Xiao is omnipotent and will definitely find a way. It seems that I was too narrow-minded. He smiled and stood up. "Since that is the case, I should also leave. Little Gongzi is not feeling well right now. You should go lie down on the bed." He looked around. "Why is there not a single servant in this room? I was the one who asked them to leave." Tian smiled. "After what happened last night, I do not dare to use the servants in this fu. Does Imperial Censor Yuan dare to use them? You are very brave." Yuan Baozhen smiled. "But you cannot see right now. Do you need someone to serve you?" "Fei Nu will serve me. Moreover, I can find my way there." She smiled. "Imperial Censor Yuan, do not worry. I could do it myself." Yuan Baozhen smiled. "Little Gongzi is clever. Then I will leave first." After saying this, he turned and left. But when he reached the door, he turned back and stood at the door without moving. In the room, Dingy did not move a single step. When the two of them came in, the one talking was Yuan Baozhen. He did not speak. Tian easily thought that there was only one person in the room. Yuan Baozhen stood at the door and gave Ding a look. Tian stood up and walked shakily into the room. Ding was right in front of her. She could feel that there was an email piercer hidden in her sleeve. She had taken it from Inyu last night. She had already thought about how to dodge if Ding attacked her. She also knew how to stab this email piercer into his heart. The young man's eyes were covered with cloth. He did not reach out to take it. She held onto the wall and slowly walked into the room. The people in the room were probably afraid that she would trip because of her inconvenience, so they moved all the chairs to the side. From the table to the bed, there was nothing. She only needed to hold onto the wall and feel her way through. Ian did the same. She walked until she was close to the bed. Dingy bent down and placed a stool in front of her. The young man did not feel anything and took a step forward. With a clang, he tripped and fell forward. He fell at a bad time and hit the edge of the bed. He screamed, and his forehead immediately became swollen. He fell to the ground. Half of his body was on the ground, and his hand was scraped. He did not get up for a long time. He shook his head at Yuan Baozhen. Yuan Baozhen saw this and turned to leave. He also quietly followed him. Tian was the only one left in the room. Tian covered his head and screamed in pain. No one saw, but she sneered. Chapter 97. Tian did not sit up immediately. Instead, she held her head and groaned. She was thinking about something else. Yuan Baozhen was really here to test her. First, he wanted to know how she found out about the wine. Second, he wanted to see if she was really blind. This person was very meticulous. He even asked Ding to put a stool there to see her reaction. If Yan's response wasn't right in the slightest, this pair of master and servant would have other thoughts. She had excellent hearing and heard Ding Yi's movements. She also knew that Yuan Baozhen did not leave immediately. That was why she was here to cooperate with them and act out what Yuan Baozhen wanted to see. But Yuan Baozhan was testing her. Wasn't she also testing Yuan Baozhan? They obviously had a close relationship, but she insisted that they only knew each other. He Rufei's servant, Ding Yi, would not follow him here. There was indeed something wrong with the wine. But what puzzled Yin the most was what role he Rufei played in this matter. Did he and Yuan Baozhan conspire to murder Xiao Ju? Or was it he Rufei who instigated it? Or were they working for someone else? Next, she had to follow Ding Yi and find out what the two of them were up to. There was no movement outside. Tian's I-O became louder. There was movement behind her. It was Fei Nu's voice. He asked, "What happened to you?" "I hurt my head just now." Tian blankly reached out to grab him. "Brother Fei Nu, come and help me. I sprained my ankle." Slave Fei answered and went forward to help her onto the couch. Tian's eyes were covered with a cloth. Therefore, Fei Nu could not see her emotions from her eyes. Naturally, he did not know what Yin was thinking. In fact, the act just now was not only for Yuan Baozhan, but also for Fei Nu. Yuan Baozhan and Ding Yi were so focused on testing Yin that they didn't notice that Fei Nu had been standing at the door and listening to what was going on inside. They did not notice, but Yin did. Fei Nu only ordered people to remove the bowls and plates. Why did he leave for so long? It was nothing more than the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Yin didn't know why, but he always felt that Xiao Ju and Fei Nu didn't trust her. This wasn't a big deal. Of course, they wouldn't trust someone they didn't know. However, she sensed that not only did Xiao Ju not trust her, but she was also wary and suspicious of her. Yin was also confused. She didn't think she had done anything that would make people suspicious. Now that she was here, she didn't even have any interactions with Yuan Baozhan in the past. She didn't know why she was suspected. Forget it, if they were suspicious, then so be it. One act was enough to deceive two people. Yin said, "Brother Fei Nu, where did you go just now? That Imperial Censor Yuan came to sit for a while, but you didn't see him." Fei Nu avoided her question and only asked, "How's your head?" Yin touched her head and said, "It's swollen. I don't know when it'll go away." She sighed heavily again. "This is really a trap. I think that little brother of mine is quite smart. It's right that he didn't come. This is much more dangerous than being forced into a marriage. If Chung Lisu was here, she wouldn't know what would happen. Sit down and rest for a while." Fei Nu's voice was emotionless. "I'll be at the door. Call me if you need anything." He left again. Yin lay on the bed. She was covered with a cloth, so Fei Nu couldn't see her expression. She also couldn't see Fei Nu's reaction. She thought that he was expressionless. She didn't know when Xiao Ju would come back. By the time Xiao Ju came back, it was already late at night. On this day, Yin and Fei Nu stayed in the Sun residence and didn't do anything. The wine and dishes that Sun Xiangfu sent over had to be tested for poison with silver needles. Because Yin couldn't see, she simply slept in the room for the whole day. Fei Nu also stood guard at the door for the whole day. When Xiao Ju came back, Fei Nu, who was sleeping on the bed, immediately woke up. He got up and walked to Xiao Ju's side, saying, "Young master." Xiao Ju indicated for him to follow her into the room. Fei Nu glanced at Yin on the bed. Under the dim light, she was sleeping soundly. When Fei Nu and Yin entered the room, they didn't see the youth sleeping soundly on the bed. Her hands were gently tapping the mattress under her body. Yin obviously wasn't asleep. After sleeping for the whole day, how could she continue to sleep at night? She wasn't a pig raised in the village. Second young master Xiao obviously had something to say to his confidant. She guessed that Fei Nu would also tell this commander-in-chief everything that happened here today. Yin didn't have the guts to listen to the master and servant whispering to each other. Xiao Ju wasn't Yuan Baozhan. She knew real martial arts. Once she exposed herself, there would be too much trouble and the losses would outweigh the gains. However, she could imagine what Fei Nu would say to her. Yin felt that she could fool Fei Nu with her acting today. As for whether she could fool Xiao Ju, she didn't know. In the room, the lamp was lit. Xiao Ju placed her sword on the table and sat down on the chair in front of the table. "Young master, Yuan Baozhan came by today," Fei Nu said. Xiao Ju looked up and asked, "What's the matter?" From what I can see, he came specially to look for He Yin. Yuan Baozhen said a few words to He Yin. He recounted the conversation between Yuan Baozhen and He Yin to Xiao Ju. In the end, he said, Yuan Baozhen seemed to be testing He Yin. Xiao Ju pondered for a moment and asked, "What do you think?" From He Yin's answer, it seems that he doesn't know Yuan Baozhen. There were no flaws. However, it could also be that the two of them were acting together. Overall, He Yan's suspicions can be cleared for the time being. Cleared? Xiao Ju curled his lips into a smile and said, "Slave Fei, the liar in our house has even deceived you." Fei Nu was startled and didn't understand. Don't forget, when He Yin competed with Wang Ba in archery, she once blindfolded herself and shot a bird in the sky. Do you think that someone with such good hearing wouldn't be able to tell that Yuan Baozhen's bodyguard placed a stool in front of her? Young master, you mean? He could have avoided the stool, but he still fell. Firstly, he deceived Yuan Baozhen, and secondly, he deceived you. Xiao Ju said casually, "This person is very good at deceiving people." What was a blind person like? Stumbling and panicking when there was no one around. They couldn't do anything. They were very pitiful. This was the impression that ordinary people had of a blind person. Yuan Baozhen and Fei Nu were ordinary people. Naturally, they would think the same. Seeing He Yin fall and be helpless, it was exactly what a blind person would look like. But He Yin was not an ordinary blind person. Even if she was blindfolded, she could still shoot better than other people. Yuan Baozhen had never seen He Yin shoot an arrow while blindfolded, but Fei Nu had seen it before. Even so, even he overlooked this point. Deceiving you is secondary. The person he wanted to deceive the most was Yuan Baozhen. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said that there were flying insects in the wine. There were flying insects in the wine? How could this be possible? It was not summer now, and the Sun residents paid special attention to this. There were wormwood sachets everywhere to prevent insects from flying into the wine. It was not easy for He Yin to think that there were flying insects in the wine. Young master, is he Yuan Baozhen's man? Fei Nu also didn't understand. If he was Yuan Baozhen's man, why did he have to be so suspicious? He doesn't look like it, but I can't say for sure. There was a brush, ink, paper, and inkstone on the table. Sun Xiangfu had specially arranged it. He didn't like these things, but he liked to pretend to be cultured. Xiao Ju found a brush and paper and wrote a few words. His handwriting was elegant and strong. It was very beautiful. When it landed on the paper, it was as bright as a person's. "I want you to bring a letter to Lin Shuanghe." Young Master Lin? Fei Nu's calm face finally showed a surprised expression. "Young Master, didn't you not allow young Master Lin to come to Liangzhou?" He suddenly thought of something and said in disbelief, "Could it be Yin?" The handwriting quickly dried in the wind. He put the letter into the envelope and looked down. It's for him, but not entirely for him. Fei Nu didn't ask any more questions. He put the letter away and tiptoed out. Xiao Ju saw this and laughed. "Why are you so careful? The people outside have already woken up," he said. "Young master?" Fei Nu was stunned. "Forget it. When it comes to deceiving people, you are no match for him." Xiao Ju shook his head and said lazily, "In any case, he doesn't have the guts to come in." Fei Nu stood in place and thought for a while before leaving the room. After he left, Xiao Ju flicked the wick of the lamp. In the light, his eyes were bright and oppressive. Su Jingfu, the night swallowed his whispers. When He Yin woke up, Xiao Ju was already gone. He seemed to be very busy these 2 days. When He Yin woke up, he had already left. When he came back, He Yin was already asleep. They didn't even see each other. She guessed that what Xiao Ju was doing was related to what happened at the banquet at the Sun residence. However, she couldn't go with him and could only sit here and wait. But she didn't want to sit here and wait. Fortunately, after noon, when it was almost evening, Slave Fei also went out for some matters. Before he left, he reminded her to stay in the room and not go out to avoid trouble. He Yin nodded in agreement. In fact, He Yin thought that the Sun residence was not as murderous as Fei Nu said. From what happened at the banquet, it could be seen that the assassin's target was only Xiao Ju. Since Xiao Ju wasn't around, the manor was 70% safer. The remaining 30% might not be able to defeat her. This morning, Hien took off the cloth covering his eyes. It was because the cloth had been used for 2 days and needed a new one. However, the physician in the residence was scared away by Xiao Ju last time, and there was no one to make a new cloth for Hien. Although he took off the cloth, after 2 days, everyone in the residence believed that Hien was blind and didn't treat him as an ordinary person. Hien was the only one. When she took off the cloth, she felt that the sky was too bright, and she still felt uncomfortable. Yesterday morning, when she took off the cloth in front of Fei Nu, her expression didn't change. God knows how much she wanted to cry at that time. It was too dazzling. In fact, Hien had never been blind. That day at the banquet, the manservant who received Ding Yi's order had indeed thrown a handful of powder-like things at him. She blocked it, and at that time her eyes did hurt. After all, she had been blind once before, and her eyes were more sensitive than ordinary people. Subconsciously, she felt that her vision was blurry, and she suspected that she was going blind. But when she calmed down, she felt that she had actually avoided it. At night, when there was no one around, Hien secretly took off the cloth, and she could see the light of the lanterns outside. It was just a mistake because she was too nervous. She originally wanted to explain the next day, but when the next day really came, she changed her mind. A blind person shouldn't be a threat. It was much easier to be a non-threatening person and get close to Yuan Baojun than to be smart enough to discover the poison in the wine, young Master Chung. So when she took off the cloth in front of Fei Nu, Hien didn't show the slightest bit of abnormality. She had been a blind person for a long time. She could imitate all the reactions a blind person should have, and no one could find anything wrong with it. But she didn't expect that Yuan Baojun would be so cautious and especially come to confirm whether she was really blind or not. Because of this, Hien was in a difficult position. But at the same time, she was even more certain that Rufei, Ding Yi, and Yuan Baojun had something going on. Rufei must have been involved in the murder of Xiao Ju. Although she didn't know what kind of grudge Rufei had with Xiao Ju, the enemy of an enemy was a friend. Now, she and Xiao Ju were on the same side. She had to find out what Yuan Baojun and Ding Yi wanted to do. Hien tied up her hair and quietly went out. Everyone knew that young Master Ching couldn't see. Other than going to the toilet, he stayed in his room every day. Moreover, these days, everyone in the residence was in danger. Sun Xiangfu was busy cleaning himself, so Hien didn't have anyone to care about her. Luckily, she had a good memory. On the first day she came to the Sun residence, she already knew the way to the Sun residence. But Hien didn't know where Yuan Baojun lived. Just as she was in a dilemma, she saw someone walking quickly through the garden. It was none other than Ding Yi. Good timing. Hien praised her in her heart and quickly followed her. She moved very quickly and was used to finding a room to hide. Of course, because the Sun residence was luxurious, there were rockery and bonsai everywhere, giving her many places to hide. Along the way, no one discovered her. Finally, Ding Yi stopped in front of a room and pushed the door open to enter. For some reason, the room Yuan Baojun lived in was very far away from the main hall. It was almost remote and there weren't many people around. It was autumn. In the evening of Liangzhou, the sky was already dark. Hien estimated for a moment and jumped onto the roof. She was small and thin. The roof had sharp corners and cornices, and there were carved stones everywhere. Hien lay on the roof and almost merged with it. She carefully searched for a long time and finally found a gap. She didn't know if it was because of the rain or the hail, but the fragile crystal roof was broken and there was just a gap. Hien put her face close to it and listened to the movement inside. Ding Yi walked into the room. "How is it?" Yuan Baojun asked. Ding Yi shook her head. "I lost him. You weren't discovered by him, right?" "No." Ding Yi hesitated. "I didn't dare to get too close in case he discovered me. He left early today and went to the east of the city. I looked for him in the vicinity, but couldn't find him." Yuan Baojun's expression was uncertain. "This Xiao Ju, what is she trying to do?" "She clearly got into trouble in the Sun Mansion, but she wants to stay in the mansion and go out every day. I don't know what she's doing. I keep feeling that something is wrong. He Yan heard this and became suspicious. Did Yuan Baozhen ask Ding Yi to follow Xiaoju? Has the Yamen matter been settled? Yuan Baozhen asked. Ingwe and the others are dead. There's no evidence. The spy in the mansion is also dead. Since Sun Xiangfu was notified in advance, there shouldn't be any problems. Ding Yi paused. I still don't understand. How did Cheng Lisu know about the spy's movements? He was also the one who discovered the cup of wine. You think there's something wrong with him? But you saw it yesterday. He can't see. He's just an ordinary young man. Even so, I still feel that something is wrong. Ding Yi couldn't put his finger on it. That young man should be blind. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to act so well. The servants in the mansion also said that he stayed in his room all day and was guarded by Xiao Ju's bodyguards. From the looks of it, he really did look like a weak, rich young master. However, Ding Yi still remembered that during the banquet, Cheng Lisu had looked at him. That gaze was fleeting, as if he had just glanced at someone else. However, at that moment, Ding Yi seemed to have felt the shock and anger in the young man's eyes. When he looked again, the young man had already looked away. It was as if what he saw was just an illusion. But was it really an illusion? Their conversation was lively, but Yan's heart was filled with shock as he listened. Ingwe is dead. There's no evidence, she told Sun Xiangfu. This meant that the assassination of Xiao Ju was indeed done by Yuan Baozhen. Perhaps Sun Xiangfu had even helped him. Now that Xiao Ju was still living here, wouldn't it lead others to continue to harm her? As she was thinking, she heard Yuan Baozhen ask, Has Brother He sent you any letters recently? He Yin thought that this Brother He was most likely referring to He Rufei. No. Before Master left, he told me that I must succeed this time. Ding Yi said, If I fail, I won't be able to answer to Prime Minister Su. Prime Minister Su? Yan's heart skipped a beat. He Rufei asked Ding Yi to assassinate Xiao Ju because he wanted to answer to Prime Minister Su. In other words, He Rufei was working for Prime Minister Su? But who was Prime Minister Su? She knew the current Prime Minister, Su Jingfu, but she didn't know if he was the Prime Minister Su that Ding Yi mentioned. We've already failed. Yuan Baozhen was half angry and half disheartened. I didn't expect Xiao Ju to be so difficult to deal with. Now he's starting to suspect me. I don't know if I'll have another chance in the future. Xiao Ju is difficult to deal with, but he still has a blind nephew. Ding Yi said, Since this person is blind and doesn't know anything, I think we can use him. What do you want to do? Yuan Baozhen asked. Don't forget what I used to do. Ding Yi said, I have my ways. Before he could finish, he heard a creaking sound above his head. A small piece of green fell. Ding Yi's expression changed. Who's there? He jumped out. Under the moonlight, someone's figure flitted past like a swallow. In the blink of an eye, she disappeared into the night. He Yin complained in her heart. Sun Xiangfu pretended to be cultured. Even the roof tiles were made of green crystal tiles. It looked good, but it was very fragile. Even a weak person like her would accidentally collapse if she leaned on it. What kind of logic was this? He Yin suspected that Sun Xiangfu was pretending to be weak. The purpose of using these tiles was so that no one could eavesdrop from the roof. If it was a normal man, he would have fallen down as soon as he leaned on the roof. Ding Yi was still chasing in the distance, but for some reason, he didn't call out to the servants of the Sun family to catch the assassin. Perhaps he was hiding something. He Yin was familiar with the roads here. She hid left and right, thinking about the conversation she overheard. Yuan Baozhen came to Liangzhou, Ding Yi came to Liangzhou, and He Rufei came to Shuajing. They all had one goal, which was to assassinate Xiao Ju. And the three of them had to answer to Prime Minister Su. Now, Xiao Ju was alive and well. All the men of sacrifice were killed. Yuan Baozhen was not satisfied and wanted to come again. Moreover, Ding Yi had his eyes on her, the blind and useless person. He wanted to use her, the blind person, to kill Xiao Ju. No matter how she thought about it, when one person used another person, it was nothing more than instigating a rebellion, holding her hostage, or being a weapon. Cheng Lisu and Xiao Ju were uncle and nephew. Yuan Baozhen probably wouldn't think of instigating a rebellion. So, There were only two possibilities left. Hien was holding her hostage. First, Hien didn't think that Ding Yi could defeat her. Second, she wasn't the real Cheng Li Su. Xiaoju probably wouldn't do something so stupid as to surrender for the sake of her nephew. As for the third possibility, being a weapon, they forgot the most important thing. Hien was not blind. She had been on guard against Ding Yi since a long time ago. While she was thinking about this, Hien had already seen the house she lived in. The lights were on. Fei Nu probably came back. Hien felt around her body. She put the cloth in the room. She thought about how she still had to act for Fei Nu later and felt a headache coming on. She was afraid that Ding Yi would catch up with her. She jumped forward and entered the room at lightning speed. When she turned around, she almost choked on her own saliva. There was a wooden bath in the room. Xiaoju was sitting in the middle of the bath. The beauty was bathing. His skin was ice cold and his bones were jade white. The moonlight slipped in through the cracks in the window. His black hair was covered with a layer of cold and clear color. He looked particularly attractive. His shoulder blades were very beautiful. For a moment, Hien's mind drifted elsewhere. She thought, when was the last time she saw this person take off his outer clothes in the Xianchang Pavilion? The men in the army were mostly tough and rough. Su Zhiheng was probably considered gentle. However, Xiaoju was different from them. He was handsome and strong. His waist was especially attractive. No matter if it was a man or a woman, they would all praise him when they saw him. It turned out that this person was not only good-looking, but his body was also different from ordinary people. No wonder he was called Commander Jade-Faced. He lived up to his name. The fog made it difficult to see his expression. Xiaoju probably didn't expect that someone would suddenly barge in at this time. She immediately stood up, and with a splash, the sound of water was clear and crisp. Hien? This time it was over. Hien saw everything he should and should not see. At this moment, she was cursing herself in her heart. Why did she wear a cloth every day when she went out? Why didn't she wear it today? Or perhaps it would be better if she could not see. Second young master Xiao quickly picked up the clothes on the shelf and put them on. He looked at her coldly. The room seemed to have become colder. He was about to speak when he saw the young man in front of him open his hand and close the door. His eyes were calm and seemed to widen. However, nothing was reflected in his eyes. He said, Who is it? Huh? Second young master Xiao laughed at this clumsy acting. Chapter 98. Uncle? Are you uncle? Hien revealed a surprised expression. Like a blind man touching an elephant, he opened his hands and scratched wildly. Where are you? Xiaoju coldly looked at him, acting and mocked. Don't you know how to shoot arrows blindfolded and identify people by their sounds? What? Can't you tell where I am? Hien's movements suddenly stopped. After a moment, he smiled embarrassedly. I was afraid that you would feel awkward. Uncle, are you bathing? The youth opened his eyes and stared unblinkingly in front of him. Even though he had already put on his clothes, Xiaoju still felt uncomfortable. Where did you go just now? He asked. The latrine. Brother Fei Nu went out. I didn't dare to trust the servants here, so I went out to relax. Uncle, why are you back so early today? Hien asked. Brother Fei Nu hasn't come back yet? Xiaoju turned sideways and put on his outer clothes, saying, Don't run around here. Hien looked at him and thought about the conversation between Yuan Baozhen and his servant. He said, Uncle, have you been investigating the assassination at the banquet these past few days? Did you find anything? Xiaoju glanced at him and asked, What are you trying to say? You say, Is it possible that someone from this residence harmed you? You see, even though Magistrate Sun said that he didn't know anything, the incident happened in his residence. How could he not know anything? That doesn't make sense, right? There's also Imperial Censor Yuan. Hien racked his brains and hinted, I think he's very strange. Oh, what's strange about him? Xiaoju asked. Hien didn't know how to answer this question. He couldn't say that he went up to the roof and eavesdropped on their conversation. Furthermore, he was blinded by his bodyguard in his previous life. Hien could only say, Imperial Censor Yuan came to find me once and asked me some strange questions. If you want me to answer, I can only say that my intuition is wrong. Uncle, you should be wary of them. The young man groped for a chair and sat down. He spoke in a serious tone, which surprised Xiaoju. He slowly asked, "You want me to be wary of Yuan Baozhen?" "That's right. Think about it. If they really did harm to you, they would definitely do it again. Uncle, you are usually not in the mansion, so you don't have to worry." "But that's not right. You are usually not in the mansion, so why are you still living here?" Ian suddenly thought of something. Since he had to live in the Sun residence, he had to go out every day. Wasn't this contradictory? "You should spend more time on your eyes instead of worrying about these things," Xiao Ju said calmly. "Are you really blind?" Ian's heart skipped a beat. He played dumb and said, "Of course. What good would it do me to pretend to be blind?" Her words were powerful and resonant. Xiao Ju looked at her again and felt that all her actions were like that of a real blind person. If she was really pretending, then she was really too powerful. However, this person was used to lying. Otherwise, she wouldn't have even fooled Fei Nu. Ian saw that Xiao Ju didn't say anything and was afraid that he would continue to talk about this topic. He smiled and said, "Uncle, weren't you bathing just now? Did I disturb you by coming in? Do you want to continue?" "You can continue. I will guard the door. I can guarantee that no one will come in and no one else will be able to come in." After saying this, he groped for the door and opened it. He went out and sat on the steps outside. He guarded the door like a door god. Xiao Ju, Ian didn't listen to the movements in the room. He didn't know if second young Master Xiao was in the mood to continue bathing. In any case, Ian's mind was in a mess. Too many things had happened today. He didn't know what to think about first. He Rufei, Prime Minister Su, Yuan Baozhen, and Ding Yi's conspiracy were mixed together. In the end, it looked like Xiao Ju was bathing. "Ba ba ba," Ian scolded. He thought that even if this person wasn't blind, after all this, he would probably become blind. Although she was a woman, when she thought about it carefully, she didn't know who had taken advantage of who. It was about the same. The next morning, Xiao Ju disappeared again. After Fei Nu came to bring her food, she also disappeared. Ian didn't know what the master and servant were doing every day. Ian sat on the bed and wondered if he should sneak out to follow Yuan Baozhen and his bodyguards. However, after what happened last night, Yuan Baozhen would definitely keep a close eye on the roof. The roof of the Sun family was fragile, and it was not suitable for him to climb it again and again. Who knew that before Yin could come to a conclusion, Ding Yi came to his door. He stood at the door and said respectfully, "Young Master Chung?" Ian looked up. Ding Yi's voice was respectful and polite. "Lord Yuan invites you to have tea." "What kind of tea?" Ian asked casually. "I'm quite picky about my tea. We have all kinds of tea." Ding Yi smiled. "If young Master Chung doesn't want to, I'm willing. Ian supported himself on the bed and stood up. "I'm really bored here alone. It's rare that Lord Yuan remembers me and accompanies me to relieve my boredom. How can I be so unappreciative? Lead the way." She still had a cloth wrapped around her eyes. "Please bring me my bamboo stick." Last night, when Fei Nu came back, he brought back a bamboo stick for Ian. It was neither too tall nor too short. Ian could use it to walk. Although this person looked taciturn, he was actually very considerate. After all, the people in the Sun residence could not be trusted and no one could use them. However, it was really inconvenient for her to walk by herself. It was much better to have a bamboo stick. In the eyes of others, she would look more like a blind person. Ding Yi said, "Okay." He looked sideways and saw a bamboo stick on the table in front of him. He walked over and took the bamboo stick in his hand. As he walked in front of Ian, he handed it over and said, "Young Master Chung, please take it." Ian shakily reached out to take it. Just as she was about to touch the bamboo stick, Ding Yi suddenly withdrew his hand. Ian's body fell into the air. She was already unsteady on her feet, so her body tilted and she almost fell. Fortunately, she was supported by Ding Yi. Ding Yi said, "Are you all right, young Master Chung?" "I'm fine," Ian said with lingering fear. "I almost fell." Then, she said in a sad tone, "I can't even carry things now. It's all my fault." Ding Yi said with guilt, "I should have directly handed it to young Master Chung. I caused you to be frightened." Although he said this, his eyes were fixed on He Yin, trying to find a flaw in He Yan's face. Unfortunately, once both eyes were covered by the cloth, it was really difficult to guess the changes in He Yan's expression. He also did not know. He Yin looked at the person in front of her and sneered silently in her heart. She had changed the cloth last night. It was a black cloth. She used a needle to make a very small gap near the eyes. It was not much, just a small gap. Through this small gap, she could see the movements of the person outside. In the eyes of an outsider, He Yin was just a blind person whose eyes were covered by the cloth. He Yin saw Ding Yi's probing and the way he stared at her face. She did not expect that Ding Yi was still suspicious of her. But why? Last night, she had escaped extremely quickly, so Ding Yi shouldn't have discovered any clues. If she had reminded Xiao Ju not to drink the wine at the banquet, then the last time Yuan Baojin came over, the probing should have ended. Why did he keep probing her like this? He Yin could not figure out the reason. She leaned on the bamboo stick and said, "Forget it. It's none of your business. Let's go." "Let me help you," Ding Yi said. "No need," He Yin said. "If I really can't see anymore, I will have to get used to this kind of life sooner or later. Why do I always need help? Besides, I have the bamboo stick. It's just that I walk slower. I can still keep up. You can just tell me where to go." The young man's voice was stubborn. It sounded like he was competitive even if he was blind. Ding Yi did not find any loopholes. She said, "Then please follow me, young Master Chung." He walked forward. As he walked, he told He Yin where there were steps and where to turn left or right. He Yin actually walked very slowly. The bamboo stick tapped on the ground, making a duck 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 sound. He was very careful. He walked seriously. He was also very patient. He kept guiding her. However, He Yin could see from the corner of his eyes that this person was staring at her every tiny movement. He was still trying to find any loopholes that she might make. If she was pretending to be blind, she would more or less show some common habits when walking. People who were close to her would be able to notice that something was wrong if they paid more attention. However, He Yin had come prepared. She was wearing a cloth. He could remember the days when she was in the Su family. She had also been blind before. There was no need for her to pretend. She just had to act like she did in the past. Of the two of them, one was pretending to be blind and the other was observing. They were both on guard against each other. In the end, the one who was pretending to be blind was more skillful. They walked and stopped and did not reveal any loopholes. They had already arrived at the gate of Yuanbao Town. Ding Yi said, "Young Master Chung, be careful of the steps. We are here." He Yin tapped on the bamboo stick. Following the guidance of the bamboo stick, he walked up the steps shakily and followed Ding Yi inside. The room that Yuan Baojin lived in was on the side of the shade. It seemed that it was very difficult to see sunlight on normal days. The moment she entered, she felt that it was dark. There was even a lamp during the day. There was a teapot on the small table. There were a few teacups and a plate of snacks. He led her to sit down in front of the small table. Yuan Baojin raised his head and smiled at He Yin kindly. "How have you been these days, young Master Chung?" "Not bad, not bad." He Yin pointed at his eyes. "Except for here. Haven't you gotten better these days?" "No." He Yin sighed. "I don't know when the miraculous Dr. Uncle Found will arrive in Liangzhou." Yuan Baojin did not take this to heart. He just looked at Ding Yi. He shook his head at him. He meant that he did not find any loopholes along the way. That meant that he was really blind. When he looked at He Yin was also looking at him. The gaps in the black cloth were blurry. He Yin could not see clearly. However, he felt that this person was different from the person he saw a few days ago. He Yin's voice was still very kind. However, probably because he could not see, he did not even bother to pretend to smile. His expression showed that he was anxious. It seemed that something was not going well. That's right. They came here specifically to murder Xiao Ju, but they did not succeed. Now, they did not even see a trace of Xiao Ju every day. It was not going well at all. Yuan Baojin pushed the teacup in front of He Yin. Then, he placed a plate of snacks in front of He Yin. He smiled and said, "Have some snacks." He Yin could clearly see that there were some peanuts sprinkled on top of the snacks. He Yin still remembered Chung Li Su's advice before he left. As long as he ate peanuts, he would get a rash all over his body. That was interesting. Did Yuan Baozhen know that Cheng Li Su could not eat peanuts? He Yin felt that there was a high chance that he knew. Then, the purpose of this plate of snacks was very clear. He was still testing her. There was a problem if she did not get a rash after eating this plate of snacks. There was a problem if she did not eat this plate of snacks. He Yin thought that he was worthy of being tested by Yuan Baozhen again and again. She did not take the cup of tea or the snacks. Instead, she smiled and said in a strange tone, "Lord Yuan, I can't really drink tea and eat snacks." Yuan Baozhen's eyes moved. "Why? After you found out about the banquet, my uncle did not let me eat or drink in the residence. Every day my food is delivered by Slave Fei. Lord Yuan, it's not that I don't trust you, but it's because my uncle is a very strict person. If I eat behind his back and get angry, I can't bear the consequences." The young man's tone was very matter-of-fact. He even did not understand why Yuan Baozhen was so stupid. He said, "I advise Lord Yuan not to eat the food in the residence. Endure the desire for good food. Do not lose your life because of it." The young man's reply was very fast. There was no clue at all. For a moment, it was hard to tell whether he was telling the truth or lying. Yuan Baozhen smiled. "The tea and snacks here are also bought by your servant outside. The food outside is even more dangerous." He Yin said earnestly, "If it is really not possible, Lord Yuan, please wait. When my uncle returns to the residence, you can talk to him. Once you have my uncle's approval, I will eat these things, okay?" Yuan Baozhen did not know how to respond. Inviting Xiao Ju over to eat tea? Wouldn't that be exposing himself? He Yin felt that his words were flawless. Cheng Li Su was a little coward who was scared to death of her uncle. Yuan Baozhen took back his hand and shook his head with a smile. "If Cheng Gongzi does not want to eat, then don't eat." His tone was very disappointed. "It is fine. I came to sit with Lord Yuan. It is also good. Then, there is something I am very curious about." Yuan Baozhen looked at the young man in front of him and changed the topic. "Military Governor Xiao cares for you so much. Why did he leave you alone in the Fu these past few days? There is only that bodyguard by your side. Even if it is a bodyguard, he is not always with Cheng Gongzi. If there is a problem in the Fu, does Military Governor Xiao not worry that Cheng Gongzi will be in danger?" When these words were said, He Yin was enlightened. He suddenly understood why Yuan Baozhen and his servant would not let him go. Because Xiao Ju left her nephew alone in the Sun Fu. This was not a reasonable thing to do. The reason Xiao Ju did this was because He Yin knew martial arts. Secondly, she was not the real Cheng Li Su. She did not have any blood relations with Xiao Ju. The cold second young master Xiao would not treat her differently. But in reality, if the real Cheng Li Su was here, Xiao Ju would definitely think of a way to ensure his safety. Unlike now, where He Yin was left alone in the Sun Manor. Her entire body was written from head to toe, as if she was an abandoned concubine who was disliked and banished to the cold palace. He Yin always knew his place. Therefore, he did not feel anything was wrong. But in the eyes of others, it was wrong. She suddenly realized that this was the reason why Yuan Baozhen and his servant felt something was wrong and stared at her. But Xiao Ju was such a smart person. How could she not have thought of this? He Yin felt that it was impossible. When they were in the Xianchang Hall, He Yin was careless. Xiao Ju was very cautious. He Yin did not believe that Xiao Ju would be careless. Then, there was only one possibility. Xiao Ju deliberately made her reveal her flaws. She made Yuan Baozhen and his servant suspicious of her and tested her again and again. But why? Even if Xiao Ju was suspicious of her, at least for now, they should be working together. Could it be this bastard was using her as a shield? She attracted the attention of Yuan Baozhen and his servant so that Xiao Ju would have time to do his own thing. The more He Yin thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. He wanted to tear Xiao Ju into pieces. But she did not show it on her face. She only said innocently, "What danger could there be? My uncle already said that the real danger is not in this Fu. I am very safe in this Fu. Lord Yuan, let me tell you," she said in a small voice, The real danger is outside the Fu. Outside the Fu? Yuan Baozhen and Ding Yi looked at each other. Then, Yuan Baozhen asked Yin, "What does Cheng Gongzi mean?" "I don't know." Yin spread out his hands as if it had nothing to do with him. "In any case, that is what I overheard my uncle say. If you want to know, you can ask my uncle directly." She added, "I saw that he was outside the Fu these days. Maybe he went to deal with that danger." Fine. Since Xiao Ju was using her as a shield, she would kick the target back and draw Yuan Baozhen's attention to the outside of the Fu. Moreover, her image as a useless Gongzi who did not know anything was deeply ingrained in people's minds. Presumably, Yuan Baozhen did not find any flaws. Cheng Gongzi really knows how to joke. Yuan Baozhen laughed. "Since this is Military Governor Zhao's private matter, I won't ask." He changed the topic. Yan's entire body trembled. She saw Ding Yi walk over and lean close to her. He bent down and untied a fragrant ball from her waist. Cheng Li was a very particular young master. He had countless fragrant pouches and jade pendants. Yan felt that those things were too expensive and was afraid of losing them. After rummaging for a long time, he finally found a simple fragrant ball. The fragrant ball was only the size of 2 fingers. It was a small ball woven from wisteria. It was hollow in the middle and filled with spices and herbs. When worn at the waist, it gave off a faint fragrance. It was both cute and elegant. Ding Yi held the fragrant ball in his hand. His movements were very light, almost imperceptible. Yin, who could not see, could only pretend that she did not notice. She did not think that Ding Yi stole the fragrant ball because he liked it. As expected, Ding Yi opened the top of the fragrant ball, took out the original herbs, put them away, and filled it with something else. It could not be anything good. After doing all this, he gently tied the fragrant ball back to Yan's waist. From beginning to end, Yan did not move at all. Yuan Baozhen's face revealed a satisfied expression. Ding Yi returned to Yuan Baozhen's side. From the outside, everything looked normal. It was as if nothing had happened. Yin chatted with Yuan Baozhen about the past in the capital. She felt the fragrant ball at her waist heat up. In her previous life, she had been poisoned. Yin suspected that perhaps Ding Yi was good at using poisons. She still remembered what she heard when she went to Yuan Baozhen's room last night. They wanted to use her to make trouble for Xiao Ju. This was probably their plan. This thing was probably poisonous. The toxicity was not small. If she wore it, she would die. Xiao Ju, who was close to her, would also die if she smelled it. Even Fei Nu would not be able to escape. In this way, the family of 3, no, the master and servant, would really die. They could blame it all on the assassin. Perhaps when the coroner came to do an autopsy and found that she was not the real Cheng Li Su, the assassin would pretend to be Cheng Li Su and secretly kill the Right Army commander. Yin shivered. She could not let this happen. She said, "Lord Yuan, I need to go to the toilet. I want to go to the toilet first." Xiao Ju walked into the Sun residence. Fei Nu followed closely behind him. It seemed that he had been waiting for him for a long time. "Young master," Yuan Baozhen asked Yin to leave. He said. Xiao Ju put his sword on the table and turned around. He said casually, "They are probably still probing. If they can't find young master, they can only start with Yin." Xiao Ju smiled noncommittally. Yin was originally a shield that he had sent out to create a diversion. Without 2 tails, it would be more convenient for him to do things. Everyone thought that he had left the residence. In fact, today was the only day he left the residence. He had been in the Sun residence, hiding in the dark. It was just that no one noticed. "Young master, will Yin find out what you did?" "He should have already found out. But he can only lie." Xiao Ju said, "This person has been lying since the first time he met Yuan Baozhen. Although I don't know why. He dealt with it well. The better he dealt with it, the harder it was to find any flaws and the more suspicious Yuan Baozhen would be. Because Xiao Ju had left his nephew in the Sun residence, this was a matter full of flaws." Young master used Yuan Baozhen to test Yin and used Yin to test Yuan Baozhen. But what if they are in cahoots? Up until now, other than the assassination attempt at the Sun Residence's banquet, Xiao Zhu had stayed out of it. He Yin and Yuan Baozhen were testing each other. This was the perfect opportunity to find out the origins of the two people. It was killing two birds with one stone. If they are in cahoots, then we can catch them all in one fell swoop. Xiao Zhu said calmly. Originally, this matter was going to end soon. Fei Nu was silent. After a moment, he seemed to have thought of something and said, He Yin went to Yuan Baozhen's room today. Yuan Baozhen's bodyguard changed the incense ball that He Yin was wearing. Xiao Zhu raised his eyebrows. He didn't notice? No, it was just an act. I'm afraid that the incense ball is poisonous. Commander-in-Chief, you should stay away from him today. Xiao Zhu looked out of the window and suddenly said, He Yin should be back at this time. What is he doing outside? Just as he finished speaking, he heard a servant from the Sun residence running in breathlessly. As she ran, she said, It's not good. It's not good. Fei Nu opened the door. What's not good? The servant stammered, Young Master Chung. Young Master Chung fell in the latrine. Chapter 99. Outside the washroom, there was already a circle of maids. The leading maid said worriedly, Young Master Chung, are you all right? Can you let us in? What answered her was the young man's exasperated voice. No, you're not allowed to enter. All of you stand outside. The maidservants exchanged glances with one another. That was true. This young master from Shua City usually looked so good. Now that he had fallen into the toilet, he would definitely be in a bad state and would not want others to see him in such a state. However, they couldn't just leave him like this. The maids were so anxious that they were about to go bald. He stood in the side room and sighed silently. To be honest, the Sun family's lavish decorations were very exquisite. In fact, the washroom was already very clean. However, she only did this to get rid of the incense ball that Ding Yi put on her waist. Young Master Chung, who fell into the toilet, must have washed his entire body. Even if it was an incense ball, after such an incident, it could only be thrown away. Yuan Baozhen and his servant asked reasonably. They couldn't find any problem with it. If a person had to put a dirty incense ball on their body after a trip to the toilet, then they would be sick. However, Ian looked at the stains on her body through the cloth. The sacrifice she made was too big. Chung Li-su, this child, didn't seem to be very smart. She didn't think that she was the real smart one. These dirty and tiring jobs were now all done by He Yin. What was this called? She thought in her heart. Suddenly, she heard someone shout from outside. Young Master Chung, come out. Military Governor Xiao is here. Xiao Zhu is here? He Yin originally thought that Fei Nu would come to pick him up. Why did Xiao Zhu come back? He came back so early today? Before she could think clearly, she heard Xiao Zhu's voice from outside. Chung Li-su, come out. He Yin, why was she always in such a sorry state every time she met Xiao Zhu? He Yin took a deep breath and walked out shakily with the help of the bamboo stick. Everyone outside held their breaths. The young man's clothes were stained, and his hair was a little messy. His eyes were covered with a black cloth, and his expression couldn't be seen, but his mouth was flat. As soon as she came out, she hurriedly complained in a direction. Uncle, you're finally here. If I wasn't lucky, you would have a nephew who fell to his death in the toilet. Xiao Zhu. Ian took a step forward and Xiao Zhu dodged sideways. Ian loved cleanliness the most. It was probably the biggest concession that he could make by tolerating his disgust and coming here to pick up Yin. Fei Nu, bring him back and wash him clean. Xiao Zhu couldn't stand the smell on Yan's body and turned to leave. Yin cursed in his heart. Look, is this something a human would do? Who did she fall into the toilet for? Xiao Zhu was really an ingrate. Fei Nu came over to help Yin. This person also followed Yin closely. Yin fell into the toilet and even used a handkerchief to help him. Yin was speechless. Yin didn't need to remind him this time. Fei Nu ordered someone to bring hot water and a wooden basin for bathing. He said to Yin with a wooden face, "Go in and wash up. You're not going to help me bathe?" She asked tentatively. "You have a fiancé. It's not convenient." Tisk, tsk. Time really reveals a person's heart. Ian couldn't be bothered to pay attention to him. He trembled as he closed the door and jumped into the bathtub. Thinking about it, she really couldn't accept it. The dignified General Fei Hong had to jump into the toilet to avoid disaster. If this was seen by her subordinates and colleagues in the past, they would definitely laugh at her. However, Yuan Baojin also didn't expect that the incense ball he gave her would be useless before he even saw Xiaoju. After all, if the sky wanted to rain and people wanted to fall, no one could stop it. Outside the room, Fei Nu squatted down and used a branch to fiddle with the dirty clothes that Yin threw on the ground. A round incense ball rolled out from the clothes. Fei Nu used the branch to touch the incense ball and said, "This should be it." Xiaoju glanced at the incense ball on the ground and didn't say anything. "Young master, did he do it on purpose or unintentionally?" Fei Nu was also a little confused. If Yin accidentally fell into the toilet and caused the incense ball to be useless, it was too much of a coincidence. But if he did it on purpose, if he and Yuan Baojin were together, why would he do it? Even if it was a trick, it was too real. He did it on purpose. But he curled his lips and smiled. It wasn't clear whether it was disdain or surprise in his eyes. It was very complicated, as he said. He can even think of such a method. He really doesn't care about trifles. This was also true. Who would have thought that Yin would fall into the toilet pit? Perhaps even Yuan Baojin himself wouldn't have thought of it. Yan's actions were really unimaginable. Any decent person would not think of such a method. If he did it on purpose, Fei Nu looked at Xiaoju and said in surprise, "Young master, are you saying that Yin can see?" Xiaoju raised her eyebrows and said, "Most likely." Then why did he pretend that he couldn't see? Fei Nu was a little puzzled. Was it to deceive us or to deceive Yuan Baojin? Both, Xiaoju said slowly. He might not be on the same side as anyone. Just like how Xiaoju was on guard against Yin while coldly watching Yuan Baojin's act. Yin was very likely to keep himself out of the matter. She was probably watching him and Yuan Baojin fight as if she was watching a play. While deceiving Yuan Baojin, she was also deceiving Xiaoju. As for what her purpose was, it was still unclear. "Young master, will Yin interfere with our work?" "No," Xiaoju said. "It's almost over." Fei Nu was silent for a moment and said, "The reply from Shuajing will probably arrive tonight. After tonight, he would know what the background of this Yin was and what he wanted. As for Yuan Baojin, his good days were about to come to an end." In the room, Yuan Baojin almost couldn't believe his ears. He asked the servant who came to report, "What did you say?" The servant of the Sun Manor was startled by his expression and said timidly, "Just now, young Master Chung fell into the toilet. Governor Xiao took him away." Ding Yi's expression changed dramatically. Yuan Baojin held his forehead and waved his hand. "You can leave." The servant left. Yuan Baojin slammed the table. Bastard. He didn't need to think too much to know that the incense ball given to Yin today was useless. Since he fell into the toilet, his whole body must be covered in filth. He had to be cleaned inside and out. How could the incense ball escape this disaster? Not good. Yuan Baojin stood up and felt uneasy. Will Xiaoju find out about the incense ball? Xiaoju loves cleanliness. She won't touch it on purpose. But Ding Yi's expression was unpredictable. Yin might not. You mean he did it on purpose? Don't you think it's too much of a coincidence? We just gave him the incense ball, and he fell into the toilet. It was the same before. The so-called flying insect entering the cup at the banquet was only his side of the story. More importantly, why would Xiaoju leave her nephew alone in the Sun residence? There's something wrong with this person. I have a feeling that Chengli isn't as simple as he seems. If there's something wrong with him, doesn't that mean he knows about our plans from the beginning? Could this be a trap set by Xiaoju? Yuan Baojin asked. He had a bone-deep fear of Xiaoju. It was probably because he knew that this military governor of the Right Corps would kill without regard for status. I think we should do it tonight. Ding Yi finally spoke after a long time. What? Yuan Baojin said anxiously. You can't beat a sober Xiaoju. Because of this, they didn't dare to fight with Xiaoju directly. Unfortunately, they failed at the banquet, so it would be difficult to find another opportunity. Originally, they wanted to start with Chung Li Su, but this kid was even more strange. He was slippery and unpredictable. Even now, they still couldn't figure out what was going on. Yuan Baozhen's words seemed to have angered Ding Yi. A dark look flashed across his face as he said in a sinister voice, "I never planned to start with him. His weird nephew is my true target." Tian washed herself clean. In order to get rid of the smell, she took Chung Li Su's perfume and rubbed it all over her body. Only after she changed into clean clothes did she dare to meet Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju sat in front of the table and stopped her from going forward. "Stay 10 feet away from me." Tian rolled her eyes in her heart, but she smiled and said, "Uncle, I'm clean. If you don't believe me, you can smell me." She tried to go forward, but a sword sheath was hanging in front of her. It touched her nose and blocked her way. Through the gap in the black cloth, she could see Xiao Ju covering her nose with her sleeve. She looked unhappy and her eyebrows were furrowed, as if she had been attacked by a rebel army. Tian spread her hands. Okay. I won't go forward." Second young master Xiao was really fastidious. She didn't know if his fastidiousness could save his life. If she hadn't jumped into the toilet, she didn't know how long the second young master Xiao would have lasted under the poison of the incense ball. Tian felt regret. If she had known, she would have just thrown the incense ball in front of Xiao Ju. Let's see if he would still be so picky. She held onto the bamboo stick and found a chair. She sat down and thought for a while before asking, "Uncle, how long are we going to stay in this house?" "Why?" Xiao Ju said, "Do you want to go back?" "That's not it. I just feel that it's a bit weird," Ian replied. She still wanted to find out more about He Rufei from Yuan Baozhen and Ding Yi. Of course, she couldn't go back so soon. However, it wasn't right to stay here. Ian didn't know what Xiao Ju was doing, but Xiao Ju's actions had already attracted Yuan Baozhen's attention. Now, Yuan Baozhen was looking for trouble with He Yin. If this continued, He Rufei wouldn't be able to uncover many of his secrets. Yuan Baozhen might even find out about her plan. "How is it weird?" Xiao Ju said calmly, as if she didn't take her words to heart. "Every few days, Imperial Censor Yuan comes to talk to me. Tian went straight to the point. I feel like he's trying to get information out of me. Uncle, aren't you afraid that I'll reveal some secrets to him if I stay here alone?" Xiao Ju looked at him with a half-smile. "What secrets do you have to reveal?" Tian, Xiao Ju, and Fei Nu didn't tell He Yin what they were doing in secret. It was obvious that they didn't treat her as one of their own. Even if Yuan Baozhen wanted to get information, He Yin really didn't have any secrets to reveal to him. She was just an insignificant person who didn't know anything about this. She said, "That's not right either. How can an uncle leave his nephew alone in a wolf's den? Isn't that suspicious?" Who knew if Yuan Baozhen would make another sachet for her? She couldn't fall into the toilet again and again. It wouldn't hurt her eyes, it would hurt her brain. Suspicious? Xiao Ju looked down and said slowly, "I don't think he's suspicious these past few days." Tian screamed in his heart. That was because she had been lying for him. Anyone would be suspicious of such a clumsy lie. However, Tian could tell that Xiao Ju did it on purpose. She was probably trying to divert the trouble. This person was too black-hearted. She didn't even feel guilty for doing such a thing. She said, "Uncle, you've been running around all day. Have you found the culprit yet?" When she said this, there was a hint of sarcasm in her voice. Although her eyes were covered, she could imagine the young man rolling his eyes. Xiao Ju replied calmly, "I found him." Found him? He Yin was stunned. "Who is it?" "You'll find out soon." What did she mean by find out soon? She already knew that the culprit was Yuan Baozhen and his servant. Tian was so anxious that he scratched his head. He couldn't wait to bring Xiao Ju to Yuan Baozhen. Ding Yi pointed at Yuan Baozhen and said to Xiao Ju, "It's him. It's him. Catch him." However, she could only play dumb and asked, "Uncle, aren't you going to catch him now?" "It's not time yet." Xiao Ju smiled. "Then how long do we have to wait?" "When the swindler shows up." Tian what? She didn't understand what Xiao Ju meant. Before she could ask any more questions, Fei Nu had already walked over and pulled her out of the room. He pushed her out of the room and said, It's late. You should rest first." With a bang, he closed the door again. He was really heartless. Ian glared at the door behind him. There was a little person cursing in his heart with her hands on her hips. Not to mention that they were schoolmates in their previous lives. In this life, they had dealt with assassins together. They could be considered as half-life friends. What was with Xiao Ju's attitude? With this attitude, there were still so many girls in Wei who admired him. He was afraid that they were all poisoned by the sorcerer tribe of Nanjiang. She climbed onto the bed and lay flat. She pulled the blanket up and buried her head in it. "Forget it. Rest is fine. Anyway, the person Yuan Baojin wanted to kill is not me." After the autumn equinox, the night became even colder. Ian was woken up by the cold. The Sun family's blanket was made of silk. It was cotton and soft. The embroidery on it was exquisite and round. It was very luxurious and grand. Although this kind of blanket was thin, it was very warm. Ian had slept in the Sun family's house for the past few days. In terms of bedding, he was really impeccable. It was the first time that he was woken up by the cold like today. The black cloth was next to her. Before going to bed, she had taken it off. At this moment, Ian slowly sat up. He wondered if it was too disturbing to ask someone to add a blanket for him in the middle of the night. When he turned his head, he saw that the window next to him was open. The wind was blowing in. No wonder it was so cold. The cold wind blew in. 3 layers of blankets were useless. Ian wanted to get up and close the window. Suddenly, he thought of something. He turned his head. Sure enough, under the weak light of the lantern outside the window, Fei Nu's bed was empty. The person was not there. Fei Nu was not there. He did not need to go into the room to know that Xiao Ju was definitely not there. This master and servant pair were probably doing some shady business behind her back. Ian was not surprised. He got off the bed and put on his shoes. He wanted to close the window and go back to sleep. The wind was extremely cold. The branches by the bed swayed and drops of dew fell. Ian reached out to close the window. Suddenly, he saw a black shadow pass by not far away. If someone who did not know martial arts saw it, they would probably think that their eyes were playing tricks on them. It was late at night. Even the dog was asleep. How could there be someone wandering around? Ian's mind flashed. He grabbed his clothes and followed out. That person's skills were not bad. Unfortunately, the person following was Ian. Ian followed very carefully. In her previous life, she had stayed in the vanguard. She had the experience of sneaking into the enemy camp at night. Therefore, doing this kind of thing could be considered easy. This person in black was not Xiao Ju or Fei Nu. Xiao Ju and Fei Nu were very tall, but this person was not. His entire body was covered in night clothes. No clues could be seen. He seemed to be very familiar with the Sun family's courtyard. He avoided places where there might be guards and walked to an abandoned courtyard in the Sun family's residence. In the big Sun family's residence, there was such an abandoned courtyard. It was very far from the main hall. Ian's eyes were blind for a few days. He hid under the window and eavesdropped on the conversations of the servant girls outside. He knew that this courtyard used to be the residence of one of Sun Ling's beloved concubines. This beloved concubine was the youngest daughter of a rice shop owner in Liangzhou. She was beautiful and cute. Unfortunately, Sun Ling took a fancy to her and brought her home. The rice shop owner was originally engaged to a scholar outside the city who lived with his widow. The scholar was dissatisfied with the humiliation of having his wife stolen. He wanted to sue the higher-ups. However, the officials protected each other. Liangzhou City was under the control of the Sun father and son. In the end, the scholar and his widow were both sent to prison and died of illness not long after. When the rice shop owner heard this bad news, she cried every day. Sun Ling was a person who liked the new and hated the old. In just a few days, he hated this girl. Seeing her cry every day was an eyesore. He also felt that she had touched his bad luck. He raised his hand and gave the girl to his subordinates. A good girl was tortured to death just like that. It was probably because her death was too tragic. Not long after, there were rumors in the courtyard that someone heard the girl crying at night. Sun Ling felt that it was bad luck and sealed the courtyard. With the rumors of ghosts, no one dared to enter. This courtyard became a deserted courtyard. When Yin heard about this past, he wanted to rush up and twist Sun Ling's head off. There were always people in the world who were full of evil. They had done countless evil deeds. The funny thing was that these people were afraid of karma and didn't dare to move forward because they were guilty. The black-clothed man chose this place. However, it was just a deserted courtyard. Even the servant girls and servants had been removed for many years. What was the use of a place like this? There were many weeds growing in this place. Some of the trees had withered because no one watered them. Some were still alive, but no one trimmed them. The branches were in strange shapes, and the shadows they cast on the ground were eerie. Other than the wind horn, there was only dead silence. There was no sign of life. It was like a graveyard. The black-clothed man had already arrived in front of the house that the girl used to live in. He hesitated for a moment. He didn't enter from the door, but jumped in from the window. He didn't know if Sun Ling had a guilty conscience. There were many Daoist seals on the door and windows of the house. He was probably afraid that the girl's soul would come to find him. He was extra cautious. He slipped in through the window. Strangely, there were lights in this empty house. With the lights on, Hien couldn't help but be surprised when he saw the scene in front of him. In this house, there were many Buddha statues on the table and floor. The lamps were the oil lamps on the Buddha shrines. Someone must have come to light them often. Niao niao Buddha incense burned. However, it didn't make one feel calm. Instead, it made one feel cold. There were Taoist seals outside the house and Buddha statues in the house. The father and son of the Sun family were panicking. Buddhism and Taoism were one. They were not as calm as they looked, sleeping peacefully on a bed of blood. One would probably have nightmares every day. Hien sneered in his heart. Since they were so afraid, why did they do so much evil? It was obvious that the evil in people's bones couldn't be changed. At this moment, a dart flew out from the side. It was fast and hurried. Hien dodged to the side and blocked it with a dagger in his sleeve. Dang! The dart fell to the ground and knocked over an angry Buddha statue. You're not blind after all. Someone walked out from behind the Buddha shrines. After being chased for so long, this person finally showed his face. It was still an ordinary face without any special features. However, his expression had changed. He was no longer expressionless. His eyes were even shining with excitement. It was as if he had caught an interesting prey. It took you so long to find out. You're the blind one, Hien said. Dingy smiled. His smile was a little strange. He said, You're really brave. You're alone, and you dare to follow me. You purposely opened the window and flashed by. You purposely walked slowly so that I could catch up to you. Didn't you want me to follow you? I've always been a very kind person. Hien also smiled. I hate to let other people's efforts go to waste. She had found out from the beginning. However, since the other party had already set a trap, her disguise had been exposed. There was no need to continue pretending. Moreover, a real master was never afraid of traps. Only those who were not strong enough would hesitate. Ding Yi's expression changed slightly. After a moment, he smiled. Did you learn your stubbornness from Xiaoju? I was born with it. You're not Chung Lisu. Ding Yi stared into Hien's eyes. Who are you? He suspected Hien even earlier than Yuan Baotian. It was only because that day at the banquet, before Xiaoju drank, that young man glanced at him. That gaze was a mixture of surprise, anger, hatred, unwillingness, and doubt. It was filled with a myriad of emotions as it pressed towards him. Although Hien quickly moved his gaze away, Ding Yi still noticed it at that moment. He had never seen this young man before, but he knew very well that this young man had seen him before. Who are you? He asked again. Hien smiled. Gods and Buddhas were watching silently. The talismans outside the house were calming and exorcising demons. There seemed to be distant Sanskrit chanting Niao Niao. The young man slowly raised his head. His expression was familiar. His gaze was like lightning, piercing people's hearts. I'm a ghost that you killed, he said softly. I crawled out of the netherworld and came to take your life. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.